Hello everyone, and welcome to Fictional Vortex. What Ifs? So we are back with an interesting movie on What If Naruto Summoned World's Greatest Heroes and Chakra Gods. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Avengers Tower, Med Bay. With a swish, the door to the medical section of the tower opened, and Captain America stepped through. "How's our guest, Tony?" he asked, taking in the scene in front of him. The beeping FR the heart monitor echoed through the room as a few cables were hooked up to the unconscious blonde laying on the table, tracking the status of his vitals. His chest was wrapped up while an oxygen mask was placed over his mouth. Standing at his side with a hollow screen in front of him was Tony, a heavy frown on his face. "Good news is, I managed to stop the bleeding and stabilize the wound just enough to give us more time. According to the scans, something pierced through the kid's chest, going all the way through the back. Luckily his heart wasn't damaged, merely getting nicked at best, right at the edge. The bad news, however, is that was the only issue I could fix. Scanners show that nearly all his internal organs have been burnt by some sort of electrical wave. Not enough to burn them to a crisp, but enough to do some serious damage." He looked at Steve, his expression deepening. "The kid's dying, that much is obvious, and there is nothing I can do on my end. He needs emergency surgery, even possibly several organ transplants, and fast." Frowning, Steve looked at the dying child, his clenched fists shaking. What could have happened to him to put him in such a state? "I've already contacted the nearest hospital and told them to get a room ready. We just need to take the kid there as gently as possible so we don't make things worse," Tony said, moving to the heart monitor. "Can't the surgery be done at the tower?" Cap asked, getting a head shake. "Sadly no, I haven't equipped the tower with any serious medical tools for intense surgery like this. Never thought something as serious as this would happen," Tony explained. Suddenly, the tower's AI spoke up. "Sorry to interrupt, sir, but my scanners also detected strange energy radiating from within the boy. JARVIS stated. A hollow screen popped up, showing an X-ray image of the kid with glowing blue lines inside him. The energy seems to be flowing in some sort of pattern, similar to a circulatory system. However, it appears to be damaged. A red square appeared in the center of the image body's chest, right where the hole was on the kid, and showed the lines there cut apart. The energy seems to be leaking, and the more that is escaping, the more the patient's health is dropping." As stated, the kid's heart rate was slowly beginning to drop. "What?" Tony shouted. "Damn it, don't tell me that energy is the kid's life support or something. I don't have anything that can help with that, much less the hospital. Don't you have some kind of invention to help?" Steve asked with a tone of urgency, with the risk of a young boy's health on the line. "Not for something like this. Most of my available inventions were made to contain energy in a generator or gamma radiation in a container, but not contain energy in a human body that is part of the person's innards. And I don't have time to figure out how to build it," Tony exclaimed, trying to rack his brain for a solution. "Not only that, sir, but I have also detected a secondary energy source within the patient." Tony and Steve raised their brows at that. However, it does not seem to follow the circulatory system like the first, and instead seems to resonate from his abdomen. It is also giving off a large energy signature, easily triple the amount than the first, or perhaps more. Tony groaned, pinching his temple. Seriously, 2 energy signatures in the same body? Who the hell was this kid? Steve hummed, looking at the unconscious blonde. "Yet another question." "That is not all, sir," Tony groaned. "What else?" "As the first energy decreases, the secondary energy seems to be rapidly increasing in power, along with showing signs of instability, fluctuating every second. Running simulations, I predict that once the patient runs completely out of the primary energy, the secondary energy may burst out in an explosion, similar to a bomb, with the range possibly taking 1/3 of New York, if not more." With a loud slap, Tony facepalmed. "Are you fucking kidding me? You mean to tell me that not only does this kid have 2 energy signatures inside of him, he's some kind of living bomb?" He shouted in disbelief. What the hell landed on his tower? Steve cupped his chin in thought, staring at the young man. Jarvis, is there a way to prevent the explosion? He asked the AI. I estimate that if the primary energy leakage is stopped, both energies should stabilize. Should? Tony asked, skeptical. He didn't like the word, should. He liked facts being 100% certain. Especially in stressful situations like this. Then we need something to stop that leak. Steve stated. Tony sighed, rubbing the back of his head. So he needed to find a way to stop the kid's energy from leaking before he blew the tower up, and a good chunk of New York, along with everyone in it. Not to mention keep him alive. Great. They were going to need a miracle. Perhaps I can be of assistance. The two men tensed at the unfamiliar voice. Steve unstrapped his shield from his back, fastening it to his arm in a tight hold, all in a blink of an eye, while from the ceiling, repulsor gauntlets fell down from a hatch, connecting to Tony's hands, repulsors glowing at the ready. Standing back to back, the two men looked around for the intruder. They didn't have to look far, as, in a flash of light, a sort of ring of energy appeared in the air before them, becoming a portal of some sort. From it, Stephen Strange, or to most of either medical or magical knowledge, Dr. Strange, walked into the room. He instantly became the target of Tony's repulsor as Cap got in a guarded stance. Strange held up his hands. Please, calm yourselves. I mean you no harm. Yeah, I'm sure. Tony sarcastically said. Who the hell are you? He demanded. My name is Dr. Stephen Strange. Tony raised a brow at him. The famous neurosurgeon. Former neurosurgeon. Strange corrected. That life is behind me. I am now the Sorcerer Supreme. Master of the mystic arts. Protector of the earth and universe. Tony scoffed. Yeah. That last part's kinda taken, pal. Well, at least the earth part. Why are you here? Steve asked. For him. Strange said, pointing at the blonde on the table. Tony immediately got between the two, repulsors humming. You're not going to hurt him, Doctor. He warned. He didn't know this man, so PhD or not. Tony's ready to start blasting until he got some answers. I'm not going to hurt him. I want to help him. I might be able to stop the energy build-up and prevent the explosion. I'm sorry, were you spying on us? Tony asked, glaring at the coat-wearing man. No, I could sense the massive energy from a mile away from when he first appeared through the portal into our dimension. Strange explained. Okay, now you're not making sense. Steve, feeling some possible rise in tension, got between the two, interrupting them. We can discuss this later, he stated, before turning to Strange. Can you really help him? Right now, if the doctor could help the young boy, Steve was willing to hear him out. Strange nodded. Yes, I believe so, but first I need to study him. If you'll let me, he said. Steve looked at him for a while, before turning to Tony and nodding, telling him to allow the doctor to do it. With a sigh, Tony reluctantly powered down his repulsors. Stepping aside, the two watched the doctor as he approached the young blonde, keeping a close eye on him for anything fishy. Strange frowned at the state the boy was in. These injuries do not seem to be caused by his travel through dimensions, surprisingly. It was caused by something else. I dread to know what the cause was. But I can worry about that later, as well as how he managed to survive the trip. Closing his eyes, he concentrated, holding his hands over the body as he sensed the boy's energy. His temple tensed as he got a mental image of his insides. Single quote. It seems his energy circulatory pathway has been cut at his chest. Given the shape of the hole and damage range, something pierced him, but not from a blade. A hand, a fist, coated in dark energy. Curious. And given the dark energy residue on his back matching the front and the amount, it was multiple times, cleanly through, by the same person. What have you gone through, child? He thought, before focusing his attention to the boy's stomach. I sense a large dark energy source emanating from here, as well as a soul. Truly curious. Opening his eyes, he moved a hand over the boy's unclothed stomach. Where he and the others watched as some sort of design appeared. A swirl, looking like it was written in black ink, with symbols around it. What is that? Steve asked. It appears to be some sort of seal. I recognize the writing being similar to a Japanese kanji matrix, though the lettering katakana seemed to be of an old form dating back centuries to ancient Japan. Stephen explained while Tony had JARVIS take a photo of the design for later study. From what I can sense, it seems to be designed to hold in the secondary energy. And what is this, secondary energy? Why does the kid have two? Tony asked. That's what I'm about to find out, Strange said, and moving to the patient's topside, he placed his hands on the sides of the boy's head. Closing his eyes, he concentrated on linking his mind with the boy's own. Naruto's mindscape. Opening his eyes, Strange honestly did not think he would find himself in a sewer. Frowning, he looked around, gazing at the sick yellow color illuminating the chamber, the concrete walls, pipes of different sizes running across them, the dark shadows above his head, and knee-high water around his legs and coat. For the child's mind, the representation of his emotions, to take such an image. What sort of life could he have lived? A person's mindscape reflected that person's psyche and inner feelings. So to have this be one's mindscape was troubling. Resolving to find explanations later, he levitated out of the water, his coat and shoes drying instantly, and looked around. Before beginning to head down the hallway, he had to find the source of the boy's second energy and the location of the second soul, and fast. He frowned as he saw the yellow color begin to slowly go darker by the second, meaning he did not have long before the boy's death. As he moved, his frown deepened as he sensed great sorrow and sadness in the air. It nearly choked him with the amount. For there to be so much, he must have lived a terrible life. I can only sense a small amount of happiness and joy. While not a speck, it pales in comparison to the negativity. Could the boy perhaps be an orphan? It would explain the expansion of sadness. And if so, for how long? For this amount? Years perhaps. As he continued on, he narrowed his eyes. He swore he could feel someone was watching him, but glancing around, he saw no one, with not much area for anyone or anything to hide. Narrowing his eyes, he kept his guard up as he kept moving. He soon came upon a split in the hall, one to his left, and one to his right. The one on the left kept the smooth concrete walls and pipes, with said pipes becoming larger in size. Meanwhile, on the right, he could see what looked like doors. However, neither direction looked good. On the right, he could sense the biggest amount of sadness and despair, with some small evidence of positivity. On the left, he could sense the large dark energy he sensed before. It almost felt demonic, but not quite. It was strong and full of rage and negativity that it almost choked him. He looked back at the right path. If I'm right, this leads to the boy's memories. I could get some answers. However, I mustn't intrude on his privacy until I get permission. Even with all this negativity, I can sense the boy has a pure heart. Though it's strange, it almost feels like his positive and negative emotions are split from each other, with the positive being dominant in the heart. Just who or what is this child? He asked, before turning to the left, eyes narrowing. He could get answers later. For now, he must meet the second soul he sensed in the boy. Walking down the hall, he fought through the dense energy as it attempted to drown and suffocate him. He would almost compare it to that of Dormammu's presence. And that worried him. How could a boy hold back such a creature? The amount of willpower needed. And for one so young. Single quote. Soon, Strange found himself standing in front of a massive set of bar gates, with a sheet of paper in the middle, the kanji for seal, shiru, in between the meeting bars. Strange hummed, staring at the paper. Interesting. To be able to seal such a powerful creature into a human body. Only the most skilled of sorts. RERs are capable of such a feat with objects. I don't know whether to be impressed or worried at such mastery and craft. Strange said, watching calmly as a massive pair of blood-red eyes snapped open from the darkness of the cage. Glaring at him, the light from the room suddenly grew brighter, illuminating the cage, revealing a massive nine-tailed fox, reminding Strange of a kitsune of Japanese mythology. Anatahadaradezu ka, watashi no fun ni shinu shite watashi ni mukaimasu ka. Who are you, mortal, to intrude upon my vessel and face me? Closing parenthesis. Strange hummed as the creature spoke, recognizing its language being Japanese, or at the least similar to it but with a deeper root accent, not like today's cultural accents. He also felt the amount of negativity emitting from the beast crash down on him, nearly making him kneel, but he held strong. Clearing his throat, Strange spoke. My name is Dr. Stephen Strange, Sorcerer Supreme. I demand to know the name of the spirit that inhabits this boy's body. Strange demanded, using magic to translate his words so the fox would understand him. The fox growled, narrowing its eyes in a fierce glare at the human. I do not understand your title. Nor do I care. You dare stand before the Kyuubi no Kitsune, strongest of the Biju. This boy is my vessel and possession to do with as I see fit. Leave my sight, before I consume your soul. Strange narrowed his eyes at the fox. Your threats do not scare me, Kyuubi no Kitsune. I can sense that this seal holds back your influence and power, as well as tie your soul to the boy. With the boy on death's row, you dare not ensure anything happens to him to hasten the process. He stated, making Kyuubi growl in anger, knowing it was true. I demand answers as to how you were sealed in the boy. As well as how you arrived in this dimension and what you are. You are no mere demon, that much I can sense. Kyuubi growled at him, glaring at Strange with such intensity as if to make him burst into flames from his glare. And pray tell, why should I speak? While it is true that if the boy dies, I do as well, I am a construct of living energy. I can never truly be vanquished. I will reform again in time. Free of my prison, Kyuubi announced with a brag, a dark and deadly smirk on his face. Stephen stares with narrowed eyes at the fox, before smirking. Your lies will not work on me, Kyuubi, he stated, making Kyuubi growl again. I may not know the full mechanics of this seal, but I know enough to know that the binding between you and the boy is firm and tight. Whatever afterlife the boy is sent to, you are taken as well. He taunted, getting the fox to grit his teeth in anger. Luckily for you, I cannot allow this boy to die. Both through my oath as a doctor, former or not, and with the threat of what will happen should this boy die. Now, will you provide me with the necessary knowledge I need to save the boy? Strange asked, before narrowing his eyes. He turned around, gazing into the shadows in the chamber. Or perhaps, I'm speaking to the wrong person. From the shadows, two figures stepped out. The first was a man, who bared a strong resemblance to the boy with his spiky yellow blonde hair reaching his shoulders with two bangs framing the sides of his face, fierce blue eyes as sharp as a blade, and a bandana wrapped around his forehead with a metal plate. The man wore dark blue pants with the ends wrapped tightly in what looked like medical tape as well as around above his right knee with a thin pouch strapped on the side. Open-toed sandals, a dark blue undershirt with a high collar, what looked like an army-like green vest, and finally a long white coat with red flames at the bottom. Beside him was a woman with long red hair reaching her waist, fair skin, and violet eyes. She wore a high-collared, sleeveless blouse under a long, loose-fitting dress with a wristband on her left wrist and sandals similar to the man's own. Gazing at her face, Strange noticed some similarities to the boy's own features. He had an idea of the identities of the two, and it only brought on more questions. Yondaime, Kushina, you two dare appear before me. Kyuubi roared in anger at the sight of the two, slamming his head against the gates in an attempt to break free and attack the ones responsible for his current imprisonment. I will tear you both to shreds. The blonde man glared at the fox. Be silent, Kyuubi. I am not in the mood to hear your complaints and threats. More so, I demand to know why you are not healing Naruto. Kyuubi glared at him, gritting his teeth. However, he will not give in to being ordered, and let the bastard figure out the answer himself. And met the fox's glare with his own while the woman looked at Strange, a frantic expression on her face. We heard what you said. Please, can you really help our son? Please, save him. Save Naruto. For some reason, he's not healing. Strange looked at her, nodding softly. I will try, but I will need to understand the situation that brought this on, as well as the energy that is leaking out from him. Also, if I may learn your names. The woman frowned, nodding. Of course, my name is Uzumaki Kushina. I am the mother of Uzumaki Naruto. The male turned to the sorcerer. I am Namikaze Minato, Naruto's father. Doctor. Strange nodded in greeting. You may have heard, but just in case, I shall reintroduce myself. I am Dr. Stephen Strange. Now, while I am intrigued why how you two are able to implant your souls within your son, we can save that for another time. Now please, tell me what you can. Strange said. He will save his questions for when the boy, Naruto, is not dying. Cow. Opening his eyes, Strange exited the boy's mind, who he now knows is called Uzumaki Naruto, or in American ways, Naruto Uzumaki, after speaking with the boy's parents and being told what he needed. He learned about the boy's energy, chakra, only, unlike his planet's version, Naruto's, as well as his people, was the mixture of both spiritual and physical energies. Combined together in perfect harmony, it acted as both the boy's power source and life source. He also learned a bit about the Kyuubi, when ignoring the fox's shouting and threats, as well as the seal that bound it to its vessel. Its prison. He also learned a bit about how the boy came to appear in their dimension. Of his battle against his own friend, his teammate, who attempted to desert his own home to go to a, in Kushina's words, pale-skinned, snake-obsessed, pedophile, for power. It sorta reminded Strange of Mordo, and how the man betrayed their master to join Dormammu for power at one. Anyway, apparently Naruto and his friend had clashed their strongest attacks against the other, and it seemed that the two immensely powerful attacks literally broke the space between reality and formed a crack. A miniature black hole, as it was described, or more accurately, a tear in time-space, a temporal split, which sucked Naruto in. But not before being pierced through the chest by a negatively charged lightning element piercing attack. Even being a sorcerer supreme with knowledge of the vast never-ending universes, that stumped Strange. Seriously, what kind of world taught kids stuff like that? Anyway, he may have an idea of why the boy's natural healing was not working. It was because of the foreign dark energy Strange could sense in the hole on his chest. Dark chakra, or more so, negative chakra. It was fighting against Naruto's own positive chakra, like a virus or a parasite, and preventing the injury from being healed. A leech, who, shing away Naruto's energy from the wound, stopping the only thing that can save him, and possibly aiding in killing him with its own toxicity. Steve and Tony looked at him. Well, the genius inventor asked, somewhat impatiently. Shaking his head to clear away his thoughts, Strange turned to them. He paused for a sec, thinking over a plan. After a moment, he nodded. I might have an idea. It's risky, maybe even dangerous. But it might not only stabilize the boy's energy but also save his life. Steve nodded. If it will save the kid's life, he was in. What do you need? That. Strange pointed at Tony's chest, making the man look down at it with a confused look. My arc reactor. The sorcerer nodded. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you use your arc reactor to keep the metal shards within you from getting to your heart, as well as attach it to your nervous system and endocrine system as to power your body and give it energy. Correct? He asked, getting a nod from the surprised and impressed Tony. If we implant a reactor into the boy's chest, directly in his wound, and connect it to his energy circulatory system, his chakra pathways, as it is called, it should stabilize his energy to normal levels and keep him alive. Again with should. Why can't it be 100% guaranteed? Tony complained. We are dealing with something not of this world or dimension. In a limited time before a large blast wipes out a good chunk of New York. We have no choice but to rush things with limited knowledge. Strange said. Steven nodded. Agreed. He turned to Tony. So, can you? Tony sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's possible. It's a shot, but maybe. The only problem is that I don't have any other arc reactor replacement. Anything else is just batteries for my armors. Think, Tony. You don't have any lying around. Steve urged. Tony crossed his arms in thought, racking his brain. He then remembered a certain gift from Pepper he had in his room. I might have something. It's a bit dated, but it will work. He stated. Steve nodded before the inventor went to get it. Left alone, Steve looked at Strange. Anything about the kid you can tell us? He asked, curious about their guest. Not much that wouldn't cross his privacy. What I can reveal is that he is a unique boy. A visitor from another world. Another dimension. Far from home, taken against his will to a land thought impossible by his people, with no current known way of returning. Granted a curse not many would desire. But wielding a heart of light in a sea of sorrow. Strange stated mysteriously. Captain America stayed silent, thinking over his words. So he was cast from his home. Like me. dropped into what seems like an impossible world as well. Well, as the saying goes, kindred spirits aid one another. Once he wakes up, I'll see if I can help him. Wouldn't want him to be lost, like I was. Soon Tony returned, holding an arc reactor in hand. Though it was different from the triangle one he currently had in his chest. An older model. Also, it had writing burned into the metal frame. Proof that Tony Stark has a heart. Before we do anything, Tony began, pointing to the reactor. This thing is very precious to me. It's the first miniature reactor I made. In a cave, by the way. It's also a gift from my loving girlfriend, and saved my life. He listed. Strange sighed. They were wasting time talking. Your point, Stark. Tony glared at him. My point is that I'm kinda reluctant to implant something so precious in someone I don't know. Trust me, I had people steal and misuse my technology before. How do I know the kid won't do the same? Stark, I can understand your hesitation. But right now, you are the only hope this boy has. You can save him, and place your trust in him. This boy is far from his home. From possible family, from friends. He has no one in this world. If you wish, you may watch over him. Guide him if need be. But here and now, you decide whether to save his life or not. What's it going to be? Strange stated, staring at the genius inventor along with Steve. Silent, Tony stared at the doctor, before his eyes moved toward the young blonde on the table. Sighing, he finally nodded. He'll trust his possession with the kid, and keep an eye on him to make sure he didn't mistreat it. Luckily, he had changed the metal alloy of the reactor from palladium so it wasn't poisonous to the kid's body like it was to him. Strange nodded back. Good. I shall speak to the souls within the boy, and let them know of what is happening. I will also enchant the reactor with my magic to ensure it works with the boy's energy and helps with healing him. In the meantime, you two prepare for surgery. Strange instructed. Steve nodded, while Tony blinked. Wait, what do you mean souls? He asked, but was ignored as Strange once more entered Naruto's mind. How? Naruto's mindscape. Kushina stood silent, a heavy frown on her face as she bit her thumb nervously. And why wouldn't she be nervous? Her baby boy was currently dying. She cursed Sasuke. Sorry, Makoto-chan. But she had to, for being such a dumbass and putting her son in this situation. Her son was dying. Dying. In another dimension according to that strange guy with a hole in his chest, and did she mention dying? Her baby was dying. He shouldn't be dying. He should be living a happy life. With a girlfriend or two. Working on making her grandbabies. Being an awesome shinobi eating bowls of ramen and kicking bad guy ass. Maybe becoming Hokage. Not dying at the age of 15, Datbane. Kushina was close to going frantic as she thought over that fact more and more when she felt a hand on her shoulder. Raising her head, she looked at Minato, who gave her a comforting smile. Kushina-chan, don't worry. Naruto is going to be alright. He told her. Kushina frowned, before hugging her husband tightly. Minato frowned as he felt her shake, soft sobs being heard. Why, Minato? Why did this have to happen to our baby boy? She asked, tears sliding down her cheeks. It was bad enough Naruto had to be made a Jinchuriki like her, and go through such a worse and horrible upbringing without tea. He love of a parent and the hate of nearly a whole village, but now he could die at a young age. It wasn't fair. Minato sadly did not have an answer for her. At least not one that would make her happy. He could only hold her tightly, silently watching as the light continued to grow dimmer by the minute, praying that Strange really could save Naruto. He also questioned why his son wasn't healing. With his Uzumaki blood, plus the Kyuubi's chakra, he shouldn't be in such a state. Even if he was only half Uzumaki. He had some theories but dreaded the truth. He also wondered about the status of the seal. Kyuubi was still locked up, thankfully, but with Naruto's damaged chakra network, could there be any other mess? Kyuubi scoffed as he looked at the two before closing his eyes, resting his head on his pa's hands. However, while he wouldn't admit it, Kyuubi did hope the sorcerer did manage to save the brat. More so for his own survival than Naruto's. With the blasted seal, the threat of death was just as true for Kyuubi as for the boy. Kyuubi will not accept dying. Especially by an Uchiha's hands. You better live through this, brat, or I will make sure you suffer forever in the afterlife. Feeling the water shifting, Kyuubi opened an eye, peered out of the cage, and spotted the so-called Sorcerer Supreme approaching. You've returned. That's brave of you, Kyuubi growled, getting Minato and Kushina's attention as they turned to the chamber's entrance, spotting Strange. I see you continue to speak as if you were a threat to me, beast. Strange mocked, getting a growl in return. Well, Kushina demanded hopefully, wanting to know if her son's life really could be saved. Strange turned to the worried parents. There is a way to save Naruto's life, he stated, making the two as well as secretly Kyuubi breath out in relief. The plan is to attach a device into your son, right into the wound on his chest. If we can connect the device to the boy's chakra system, it can act as a sort of stabilizer, keeping his energy under control, as well as the Kyuubi's, while pushing away the attacking energy. I am unsure if he will be able to access it though, as the device will only work as a placeholder, and not really as a conduit. But it should keep him alive. In time, the boy's body should be able to fix the damage done. If what you say about your family's bloodline and incredible healing is true, Mrs. Uzumaki. Minato and Kushina frowned, unsure about the fact their son will be unable to use his chakra, leaving him vulnerable to this new world. But if it kept him alive, but can Uzumaki blood even heal damaged pathways? Kushina thought, uncertain. She has never heard of severed pathways being stitched back together. Actually, she never heard of someone's pathways being severed in the first place. Could the famous Uzumaki healing even do that? The parents of Naruto looked at one another, holding a conversation with their eyes. After a moment, they turned to Steven. What do you need? Minato asked. We need to somehow connect Naruto's pathways into the device. I should be able to do so. But with such a delicate procedure, we need to be extremely careful. I can handle that. The voice of the Kyuubi grabbed their attention as adults turned to the fox. You? Kushina questioned cautiously, narrowing her eyes at her former Biju in suspicion. Kyuubi growled at her. I have no intention of dying. So if it means my survival, I will help the brat. This one time, Minato and Steven narrowed their eyes at the fox. While they were hesitant to trust the beast, more so Minato, but right now, they had no other choice. Very well, beast. I shall let you know when the time comes. Strange said, getting a scoff from Kyuubi, who closed his eyes again. Wait, what about Naruto's other damage? Kushina asked, referring to Naruto's inner burns. I will use a time spell to reverse the damage done. Strange told her. Kushina blinked in surprise. You can do that. Why not reverse the damage done to his pathways then? She demanded. Strange sighed. There can be unknown consequences if two different energies conflict with one another. It would be too dangerous, especially for Naruto. Kushina frowned, nodding in acceptance. Minato also frowned, getting a sudden thought. Where is Naruto anyway? Shouldn't he have appeared in the seal? He asked, making Kushina's eyes widen. He was right. Naruto should have been brought to the seal as a failsafe. So, where was he? Where was her baby? Strange frowned, having an idea on the boy's whereabouts. Cow. Darkness. Pitch black. Blackness. There was no other way of explaining what he saw. Or rather, what he couldn't see. He literally couldn't see anything. He could barely see his own hand in front of his face. I don't like this, Datbeo. Naruto thought, narrowing his eyes. Crossing his arms, he kept calm for the moment. Wouldn't do to go into a panic. Yet, how did I get here? Okay Naruto, think. What's the last thing that happened? Let's see. I woke up because Shikamaru was knocking on my door. He said something about Sasuke and a mission. Pausing, he frowned as he started remembering. That's right. Sasuke went stupid and decided to run away to Orochimaru for power. Shikamaru, Kiba and Akamaru, Choji, Neji, and I went after him. The guys separated and fought Orochimaru's goons while I caught up to Sasuke and we fought. And, single quote, Ga, with a shout, blood shooting out, Naruto gritted his teeth as unimaginable pain coursed through his body as the lightning-coated fist pierced right through his chest. The feeling of having electricity shock and burn his insides was unbearable. His hand shot to his chest, gripping his jacket. He began breathing heavily, remembering what happened. Oh yeah, he bit his bottom lip, recalling feeling nothing but pain, a flash of light, and seeing what looked like two beautiful women that could only be angels before he passed out. And now he was here, in some place dark and empty. Meaning, he shook his head. Okay, don't panic, I might still be alive and just in my mindscape. Though I don't remember it being this dark last time I was here. Is this one of Kyuubi's tricks? He wouldn't put it past Kyuubi to fuck with him when it could. Looking around once more, he thought about how to get out of this darkness. Ba-chan must be scared out of her mind at my state. Or pissed off that I got myself really messed up. As he looked around, he stopped, as squinting his eyes, he swore there was something in the darkness ahead of him. What is that? Curiosity getting the better of him, Naruto started approaching whatever it was he saw. He had nothing better to do than that. However, as he was getting closer, he began to get a clearer view of what it was, and what he saw made him raise a brow. In front of him, pushing away the darkness, was a lit burning campfire, illuminating a small piece of the darkness, revealing the dirt ground under him he could not see before. However, that wasn't the only thing he saw. Sitting in front of the fire was a person, a figure, sitting on one of the two placed logs to sit on, their features completely obscured by a dark violet cloak as they sat facing the flames, still as a statue. Hello, Naruto asked with uncertainty as he stepped closer. Stopping before them, the figure turned their head towards him, their face completely hidden in the darkness of their hood, before turning back to the fire silently. Naruto frowned, rubbing the back of his head, unsure of what to do. Looking at the empty log, he sat on it in front of the fire, opposite to the silent figure. He watched them continue to seemingly stare at the fire, not moving an inch or pay him any attention. As they sat there in silence, Naruto was beginning to grow impatient. Where am I? He asked. Who are you? Hello, he called, his brow twitching in growing annoyance at being ignored. Answer me, Datbeo, he shouted, standing up. His chest puffed as he huffed, hands clenching as he stood glaring at the figure, who didn't even show any reaction to his shouting. Their hooded head raised slightly up to him, before lifting an arm toward him. From the end of the sleeve, something dropped down, dangling on a string. Naruto's eyes widened when he saw it was his necklace. The one Tsunade gave him after winning their bet. Where did you get that? He asked, a slight stutter in his voice. He hadn't realized that he didn't wake up with it, and had assumed he lost it during his fight with Sasuke. The robed figure was silent, still holding the necklace out to him. Wordlessly, he reached out and grabbed it. He held the necklace in his hand as the person pulled their arm back, before going back to staring at the fire. Naruto looked down at the necklace, feeling the surprisingly warm crystal in his palm. However, he noticed something. No longer was the crystal a turquoise color. Instead, it was now midnight black. He raised a brow at that, wondering if his use of Kyuubi's chakra could have caused this change. He looked at the mysterious person, before sighing and sat back down on the log, placing the necklace around his neck. Can you tell me where I am? Can you tell me anything? He almost begged, wanting an answer or something. The robbed figure looked at him, before raising an arm at him. He blinked in confusion before his eyes widened when from the sleeve a hand came out, a skeletal hand, index finger pointed, the tip touched his chest. Wah, he asked as his body started to glow. He looked back at the person. Hey, what's happening? What's going on? Until we meet again, Uzumaki Naruto. That was the last thing he heard, before he vanished from the void, leaving behind the robbed person, who went back to staring at the fire. Yes, until we meet again, child of prophecy. How? With everything sorted out, they got things ready. Tony called his personal medical staff on pay to do the reactor implant surgery after Strange used whatever mumbo-jumbo he did to fix the kid's insides, not offering an explanation on how he did it, much to Tony's annoyance. He had the necessary equipment. NT shipped over to do the surgery to implant the reactor at the tower so they didn't have to move the boy. Tony and Steve had to wait with the others outside the room while the doctors worked. Whoa, old someone explain to me what is going on. Janet demanded, before pointing at Strange who was with them. And who is this? Stephen nodded to her in greeting. Dr. Stephen Strange. He introduced himself. He had to wait for the operators to safely implant the reactor into Naruto before he did his part. The famous neurosurgeon. Didn't you go missing after an accident? Hank asked, looking at the man in surprise, while also wondering when and how he arrived at the tower, as he came out of the room with Steve and Tony. Steve cut in. It's a long story. Just know that Dr. Strange here is helping ensure the boy in the room is healed up. Natasha looked at the ancient soldier. Did you find out anything about him? Thor nodded. Such as the scoundrel that dared to harm a child to such an extent. His body sparked in his anger. His hammer sought to vanquish the life of the monster who has decided to bring such pain to a child. Captain America looked at Stephen, who decided to explain. Not much information was given, but what was may prove useful. The boy's name is Naruto Uzumaki. Carol blinked, tapping her chin. Naruto. Sounds Korean or Japanese, though he doesn't look like it. His appearance was more Caucasian than Japanese. Strange nodded. It would appear the boy has come from a dimension far from here. He was transported by accident through a rip in space-time after engaging in combat with a traitorous comrade of his. Another dimension, really? Janet asked, skeptical as she crossed her arms. Strange smirked at her. You were in a team with a god of thunder from Norse mythology and a soldier from World War II, and you find my words skeptical? He asked humorously as Thor nodded in agreement. Janet blushed lightly at the reminder, conceding. Yet I do not recognize the clothing the boy wears from any of the 9 realms. Thor stated. That is because the boy comes from a world far from our circle of realms and realities. It is by either a miracle or the will of some cosmic entity that he was able to survive the trip all the way here. Strange stated. Seeing the looks he was getting, he explained. Traveling through dimensions is not safe for any traveler or being. Not without the proper defense. The only way to travel between spaces of reality is by going through the gaps between dimensions. However, going through them is practically suicide, as your body would not be able to handle the stress. Imagine going at sonic speed without any protection or clothing. Your body would be unable to handle it and at worst, get broken down into atoms. The group flinched while Hank rubbed his chin. Fascinating, he muttered, getting elbowed by Janet. The fact that Naruto managed to come through the wormhole in one piece, let alone alive, is beyond lucky. Strange said. Tony shook his head. Not that this science talk isn't fun or anything, but I would just like to point out that I found these on his person. He said, holding out a kunai blade and shuriken he found in the pouches among the kids' stuff. Clint raised a brow at them, recognizing them. Is that a kunai and shuriken? Tony nodded. Yep, ninja weapons. And very durable ones. Not of cheap metal most would find in Japan's gift shops. My scanners tell me that the metal is unlike anything blacksmiths in Japan use. Nor does the texture match anything found today. It's different from our iron or steel. A completely unknown element altogether. They are also tools for killing. Natasha said, narrowing her eyes, which could only mean, he's a child soldier. Steve said, frowning, which adds another point to the kid being from another world or time. Considering that ninja became extinct in the 17th century after the unification of Japan along with samurai. Tony said. Strange nodded. He had been told a brief history from Minato about our homeworld and has noted the similarities between it and Japan's Sengoku period back in the 15th century. My God, Janet muttered. She absolutely loathes places that still use children as soldiers of war. Children should be enjoying their childhood playing games and having fun. Not training to kill people. So what should we do? Clint asked, looking at everyone. First we wait for the kid to get fixed up and rested. When he wakes up, we can see about getting answers. After that, we can figure out what to do next. Tony suggested. Everyone nodded at that. Now, how about everyone go rest? We could use it after this little event. Everyone agreed before they began to head to their rooms. With everyone gone, only Tony, Steve, and Strange remained. I must return to my sanctuary after I do my part. If the boys should awaken. Holding out a hand, a card appeared between Strange's fingers. He handed it to Steve. Call me immediately, he stated. before entering the operating room to see the status. Bit of the serious type, isn't he? Steve commented, looking at Tony, who seemed to be in thought. Something on your mind, Tony? More like someone. I bet my near limitless fortune that a certain one-eyed director caught wind of the portal opening an energy source that shot out of the kid, and will no doubt be investigating. If Fury L earns that the kid is from another dimension, and holds such high energies, I shudder to think of what he'll do. That is, if a certain Black Widow hasn't told him already. He said, narrowing his eyes. While he trusted Natasha as a teammate, her loyalty as a secret agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. was another matter. Meanwhile, with said spy, she was moving towards her assigned room, lost in thought. Her mind went back to the mysterious boy. Her elite spy-trained mind went wild with questions. Who was he? Where did he come from? Was he really a child soldier, and if so, of what affiliation? Was he truly from another dimension? What was that strange pulse of energy that shot out of him? And more importantly, was he dangerous? She frowned, wondering if she should contact Fury about this, if he didn't know already. Natasha. Blinking, Natasha stopped walking, glancing over her shoulder where she spotted Janet approaching her. Hey, the petite woman said, hand up. I wanted to ask you something. What is it? It's about what that kid said. Do you remember? When he first landed, he said something I was curious about. Tenshi, Natasha corrected, making Janet nod. Yeah, that. Do you know what it means? You know, being a top secret agent and all. It's Japanese for angel, Natasha said, before continuing on to her room, leaving Janet who blinked before gigging. Angel, he, how cute, how, time skip. Again, all he could see was darkness, but this time, it was followed by something else. Something he absolutely loathed. His ears twitched as the sound of beeps reached them. Then his nose picked up the scent of rubber and cleaning chemicals. Which could only mean one thing. Hospital. He hated hospitals to the deepest pits of his soul, not only because of his crappy childhood but also because of his greatest fear. Ellipsis. Okay. Second greatest fear. Needles. Yes, Uzumaki Naruto, the guy who once stabbed a kunai to a wound on his hand, which was coated with poison, as well as stabbed a kunai into the back end of an out-of-control sand-covered Jinchuriki, was scared of needles. Call him childish, but fuck you. He also hated the smell of hospitals, it always made him sneeze. Seriously, how much of the stuff do they use? Anyway, while loathsome, the smell was something he was happy for. What's more, that as his eyes twitched and slowly opened, he was nearly blinded by a bright light. Yep, definitely a hospital. Cringing, he moved his arm to shield his eyes, only to feel a slight tug from something on it. Opening his eyes fully, he glared at the bright lights above him. Sparing a hard glare at them, wishing they would explode, Naruto looked around. That's when he noticed something strange. For one, the walls were metal, colored a soft dark grayish blue, not the familiar white concrete he was used to. Walls of dark blue metal plates surrounded him. Second, were the strange technological additions alongside the heart monitor beside him. He raised a brow at what looked like a large television screen on the wall in front of him. Okay. Definitely not in Konoha. Being the strongest of the main villages, Konoha was slightly more technologically advanced than the others, but not this much. They had televisions, radios, power plants, and movie theaters, sure. But that's it, and their metal supplies weren't enough to build anything big besides bunkers and Anbu and Hokage headquarters. He should know, having infiltrated into them enough times as a kid for pranks. But I don't recognize this place, he thought, narrowing his eyes. Was he captured by Orochimaru, or some other village, or by someone unknown? He moved to sit up, BEF, or wincing as pain shot through his chest. His hand shot to grip his chest where the pain was the strongest when his hand made contact with something metallic. Eyes cringing in confusion, he sat up fully, pushing through the pain. And looked down, the bedsheet over him falling down. What the hell, Datbeo? He mentally shouted when he saw a metal, something attached to the middle of his chest. It looked like a circular-shaped plate with a light shining brightly from it and small, thin metal lines coming off it attached to his skin, of which had a rather long scar going over horizontally where his heart. A leftover from Sasuke's Chidori piercing his chest. Twice. 2. He also got his neck broken by the bastard. Damn bastard pile drove him into the hard stone ground of the V.O.T.E. But he focused on the other 2 near-death moments. He also had another scar, this one larger, going vertically down his chest, looking to be stitched together, going under the metallic thing. And back out the other side. What is this? He questioned, gripping the thing. He tugged it, seeing if he could take it off, before gasping as untold amounts of pain coursed through him. Gah! He hunched over, gritting his teeth as he gripped the bedsheet, trying to push the pain away. Luckily, after a while, the pain passed, leaving him gasping for breath. What the hell was that? He mentally demanded. His mind flashed back to his mission in the land of snow when he was captured and had a device strapped to his chest that kept him from using chakra. Was this something similar, which meant that he was a prisoner? He narrowed his eyes in a glare. Uzumaki Naruto was no one's prisoner. He proved so as he yanked the IV cable out of his arm, making the heart monitor sound the alarm. Ignoring it, he pushed the covers off him and saw that he only had his boxers on. Wondering where his clothes were, especially his jacket and tool pouches, he shook his head to dismiss it for now. Getting up sluggishly from the bed, holding the side railing to not fall, he gripped his chest as every movement was painful, yet he pushed on. He was on his feet when he jumped as a sudden voice sounded. "Sir, I must ask you to please return to bed while I notify Mr. Stark of your awakening," the AI of the tower said. Unfortunately for the computer, Naruto could not understand what it was saying. "What?" he asked, looking around for the voice. Getting in a guarded stance, he narrowed his eyes as he glanced around. "Who's there? Where am I?" he demanded. "Sensors indicate your stress levels are rising. Would you like a beverage brought to you?" Jarvis asked. Scowling, Naruto decided to ignore the voice, and instead focus on getting out of wherever he was. He looked at what he assumed was a door. He didn't see a handle or grip to open it. There was a weird box thing on the wall beside it but didn't know what it was, so he left it alone. He shouldn't risk setting off an alarm or something. Focusing back on the door, he smirked. Nothing a Rasengan couldn't break down. Holding out his hand, he started gathering chakra to his hand and Gah! With a startled and pain-filled cry, he cancelled the process, gripping his chest tightly as he dropped to a knee. His insides felt like they were on fire, while his chest felt like someone stabbed it with a kunai and moved it around his insides. Hunched over with a hand on the cold floor to keep himself up, he breathed heavily. "Chikusho! Damn it!" he shouted in anger. He should have known this stupid thing in his chest would mess up his chakra. Glaring, he got back up. "Sir, please return to your bed. I have alerted Mr. Stark and he is currently on his way." Ignoring the nonsense the voice was sprouting about, Naruto stared at the metal door. "Guess we have to do this the old-fashioned way," he muttered before charging at the door. Thud, thud, thud. He punched against the metal frame as hard as he could, leaving small dents on it. He also slammed his shoulder against it. "Let me out," he yelled as he slammed his shoulder against the metal door as hard as he could. However, no matter how hard he slammed against it, the stupid thing wouldn't break down. Growling, he stepped back, looking around for another way out. While he may have not paid much attention to all of his classes in the academy, there were some he actually did. Such as on what to do when you find yourself captured by an enemy and need to figure out how to escape. Okay, like Iruka-sensei said, take in your surroundings and look for ways to escape. He soon found it, when he spotted a vent at the top of the sidewall, near the ceiling. Smirking at the sight of it, ran straight towards the wall. Once close, he placed his foot against the surface, before kicking himself upward. Leaping upwards, he stretched his arm out, fingers moving into the opening holes, and grasped the metal plate. Gravity pulled him downward. He quickly ripped the plate off the wall and threw it over his shoulder, while his other hand grabbed the edge of the vent. Hanging off the edge, only a couple of feet off the ground, Naruto grinned as he pulled himself up into the vent, though he had some slight sluggishness as he felt very weak. Still, he managed to climb into the tight space. smirking at his luck at the vent being big enough to let a person crawl through, or at his short stature, being enough to fit in, not that he would ever admit that part. He wasn't short. Once inside the vent, Naruto proceeded to crawl down the metal space, groaning as his body ached all the while, but ignoring it, he pushed on forth, focusing on escaping. No less than a minute later, the doors to the infirmary swooshed open, as Tony walked in. Seeing that their guest was missing, Tony groaned. Great. Just great. How the hell is the kid up and about already? It's only been a few days since his operation. He shouldn't be walking around for at least another week. Jarvis, where's the kid? I'm afraid you just missed him, sir. He had just escaped through the vents. The AI stated, making Tony curse. Damn it, I'll have to notify everyone to search for him. Who knows what's going through the kid's mind right now? Sighing, Tony turned and left the med bay, contacting the other Avengers and alerting them of the situation. How? Naruto's paw. Don't these people clean their vents? Naruto grumbled as he crawled through the dusty metal way. He needed to figure out where he was, and a way to contact Konoha. Hopefully, he wasn't somewhere too far from familiar land. Being unable to summon the toads at the moment, he was on his own. Coming upon a fork, he looked down both paths. With a hum he wondered where he should go. However, before he could decide, he heard something from down the right. Turning to the direction, he tilted his head, trying to hear what the sound was. It sounded like voices. However, they sounded muffled. Narrowing his eyes, Naruto began to go down the right way towards the voices. Hopefully, he could find out where he was. Soon enough he came upon a vent hatch. Getting near it, he looked down the hatch. Down below, he saw two men standing in a hall. 1W. As a man with short light brown hair wearing purple lensed glasses, wearing a violet and gray outfit with a quiver full of arrows strapped to his back. The other man wore what looked like chainmail armor under a black chest plate with 6 silver disc-like things on his chest. He looked to be pretty muscular, evidenced by his large arms under the chain armor. He also had a long red cape behind him, a helmet covering the top and sides of his head with wings on the sides, and finally, gripped in his hand, was a pretty big stone hammer with a short handle, a leather strap at the end. Hee-haw. Long light blonde hair flowing down to his shoulders under his helmet and blue eyes from what he could see from his angle. Who are these guys? Naruto thought, raising a brow. They don't look like any regular ninja. Shaking his head, he focused back on the task at hand. Like Kakashi-sensei always said, look underneath the underneath. Gazing down at the men, they seemed to be in a conversation. Unfortunately, Naruto couldn't understand what they were saying. Were they speaking in code? Great, just great, he thought with a groan. First the disembodied voice, and now this. Hopefully, not everyone spoke in the weird code. Looking back at the men, he tried to find any headbands or sign of what village he was at, but unfortunately, he couldn't spot any. And I don't know anywhere with clothes like theirs. Seriously, where in Kami's name am I? Just then, he saw the men move out of sight, heading off somewhere. After a moment, waiting to see if anyone else would appear and seeing no one, Naruto moved the vent hatch out of the way and silently dropped down into the hallway. Keeping low, Naruto looked around for any sign or sound of anyone approaching. Luckily all was silent, so standing up, he slowly moved down the hall, keeping his steps silent and breathing low like he was taught in the academy. Reaching a corner, Naruto pressed himself against the wall, nudging slightly enough to peek around the corner into the other hall. Seeing no one, he frowned, feeling both confused and cautious. Wherever he was, there didn't seem to be a lot of people. He'd expected to see guards everywhere. He also cursed the fact that he couldn't see any windows around. I've got to find a way out, he muttered. He glared down at the device on his chest. If he could use his chakra he could just Rasengan his way out. As Shikamaru would say, troublesome. He grumbled before the shirtless blonde slowly began making his way down the hall. How? Meanwhile in Naruto's mindscape, Naruto, you need to calm down. These people are not going to hurt you, Datbane. Naruto, Kushina shouted, frowning as she and Minato gazed at the image floating in front of them. Showing Naruto's perspective, watching as he snuck around, what looked like the base of his saviors, not that their son currently knew that fact. Groaning, Kushina turned to her husband. Why can't he hear me, Minato? Minato frowned, keeping his gaze on the screen, watching as Naruto continued sneaking around and avoiding any possible figures. He cupped his chin in thought. If I had to guess, Sasuke's attack may have indeed caused damage to the seal. Nothing that could break Kyuubi free, but it seems that Naruto doesn't have connection with his mindscape. At least, not in terms of communication. Kushina frowned in confusion. What do you mean? Minato frowned, turning to her. I mean that Naruto can't hear us or Kyuubi from the seal. So we can't talk to him. Not unless he comes here. Kushina frowned, worried. But if he can't hear us, or understand what those people are saying, if Strange was right about the difference in the language, then what's going to happen? His frown deepening, Minato turned back to the screen with his wife. I don't know, and that worries me. Hopefully, someone will be able to calm him down before he does something rash. Like picking a fight, Kushina groaned, facepalming. He does take more after me, Minato. She reminded him. Minato shared her groan. This can't be good. How? Naruto figured he'd look pretty weird, standing in just his underwear in front of one of the metal knobless doors. However, had a goal. A plan, and he believed it lied inside this room. He crossed his arms. Without his chakra, he'll only have his ninja skills to help him, and like any good ninja, their most important tool was information. While he didn't like it, Naruto will have to find answers himself. Where he was, who these people holding him captive were, any way of contacting Konoha. Anything he could find will be just as valuable as any of his jutsu. At least that's what Kakashi-sensei told him. And Iruka-sensei. And Old Man Hokage. And Ero Sennin. And Ba-chan. And Saku-oke. Pretty much everyone. Grumbling about people always taking hots at him for not being as smart as Sasuke or Shikamaru, Naruto tried to figure out how to open the door. Obviously trying to break it down didn't work the last time. Seriously, who makes doors out of metal, and with no knob? He couldn't pick the lock. Not to mention he didn't have his tool pouches or hidden pouch in his sandal. On that note, he'll have to find his sandals and awesome orange jacket. Tisking in annoyance, he looked at the box sticking to the wall beside the door. Leaning closer, he looked at it. He couldn't see any buttons on it, just a narrow slit on the front side. Scratching the back of his head, he carefully placed his hand on the box thing, trying to see there was a hidden switch or something to open the door. However, there was no such luck. No button nor a switch. Now normally, Naruto would just forget about it and continue trying to find a way out elsewhere. However, he really wanted to see what was inside this door. His curiosity compelled him, so he did the only thing he could think of. With both hands, he grabbed hold of the box and began pulling as hard as he could. He gritted his teeth, sweat gathering on his forehead. He continued to pull with all his might before the box finally tore out of the wall, leaving sparking wires. Staggering back, Naruto waved his arms to try and get his footing, which he luckily managed to do. Letting out a breath in relief, he looked at the wires sticking out of the wall. Frowning in even more confusion, he angrily scratched his head. Arg, this is getting me nowhere, Datbeo. He growled, tossing the now useless box over his shoulder. Now what do I do? Suddenly, with a large spark from the mess of wires that startled him, the closed door suddenly opened with a swish. Blinking, Naruto stared at the open room. Huh. Guess that worked. Exclamation mark. Naruto jumped with a yelp as suddenly the light from the ceiling turned red and a loud alarm blared. Crap, he cursed, looking around in panic. Warning, warning, security breach detected. Double crap. Ears twitching, Naruto could faintly hear the sound of people heading his way. Looking at the open room, he quickly entered. The second he did, another spark came from the hole of wires, and the door immediately shut close once more. Cow, Tony groaned, rubbing his forehead as the alarm blared. Seriously, what now? First, the strange kid from another dimension sneaks out of the med bay, and now this. Sir, the patient has been located. J-A-R-V-I-S, announce over the intercom near Tony, making the man let out a sigh of relief. Unfortunately, He has locked himself inside the room of Mr. Barton after damaging the keypad. Tony cursed. Great, now he had to fix that. With a groan, he made his way toward Hawkeye's room, where he spotted said Archer and Thor already there, standing in front of the door. Luckily the security alarm deactivated. It was giving him a headache. Oh come on, why my room? Clint practically whined as he pounded on his locked door. Open up, kid, he demanded. There was no response, but they hear the sound of stuff hitting the floor making Hawkeye narrow his eyes. You better not be touching my stuff, brat. Koko Kara no Michi. Clint continued banging on the door, trying to get it to open. Growing impatient, he turned to Tony. Can't you open this damn thing? I've built this place to stand up to heavy attacks, that includes the inside doors. I also can't open it because the kid busted the control mechanism. Then let's just bust the door down, Hawkeye said, stepping back from the door as he pulled out his collapsible bow and one of his exploding arrows. However, before he could even notch the arrow, Tony quickly moved in front of him. Whoa, hold up, can we please not damage my precious tower? The billionaire exclaimed, holding his hands out in front of him. With a tisk, Hawkeye lowered his bow. Fine, but I swear if the kid is playing around with my arrows, I'll throttle him. Tony waved him off. Relax, the kid shouldn't even be up and about in his condition. No doubt he was just startled being here and hid in your room to rest. I bet right now he's sleeping soundly in your bed. Boom, with a sudden and unexpected explosion, followed quickly by the floor under their feet shaking, Tony immediately ordered. Thor, break down the door. How? Moments ago with Naruto, as the metal door closed shut behind him and looking like he wouldn't be able to reopen it, Naruto looked around the room he had desired to enter and was now trapped inside. He didn't really know what he would have expected in the room. Maybe an office, a place with a map or radio, something to contact Konoha with, as luckily, Kakashi-sensei taught him, Sasuke and Sakura how to work radios if put in situations like this. A window to escape. Unfortunately, he was in what looked like an ordinary bedroom, slightly messy with the mentioned bed right in front of him against the far wall. Boxes pushed against the side walls with a desk in the room's corner along with a drawer. He saw what looked like a bed with a green top and holes on all sides, and colorful balls with numbers on top of it, a small target range on the wall, shelves with picture frames, as well as what looked like hoist shelves on the room sides, holding a large assembly of arrows and bows. It looked like he was in that archer guy's room, given the bows and arrows. The room was also enclosed, no window to the outside world in sight, much to his annoyance. Sheesh, don't these people like fresh air, Datbeo? He mumbled as he cautiously walked to the center of the room. Being careful of any possible traps, he looked around, hoping to find something he could use. He spotted what looked like metal objects on top of the desk, devices which he was completely lost in their function, and had no desire to mess with them. Wouldn't want to accidentally set off a bomb or anything. With a deep sigh, Naruto approached the bed and sat down on the edge. This whole thing is troublesome. Damn it Sasuke, why the hell did you have to be such an idiot? He mumbled, narrowing his eyes in a glare. He had no idea where he was, how he ended up there, who these people holding him captive were, or how to get out. Not to mention that without his chakra, his situation was even more grim. No chakra, no Kakashi-sensei or Arrow Sennin, no pants. He thought, looking down at his green boxers with cartoonish toads on them. A gift from Jiraiya for learning the Rasengan. He really should find some clothes. Seeing the closet, Naruto hummed, before sighing. He stood up and approached it. The second rule of what to do when you find yourself captured by an enemy and need to figure out how to escape. Use any item around you to your advantage, be it tools, weaponry or clothing to aid in stealth. Opening the closet doors, Naruto raised a brow at the several articles of clothing ranging from shirts to jackets. All in various shades of violet or just plain black. He also saw they were more suited for a grown man's size. This guy needs some orange, he muttered as he pulled out a plain black shirt. Holding it out in front of him, he frowned as it seemed too large for him. It can't be helped, Datbeo. He mumbled and proceeded to put it on. As it covered his upper body, the shirt falling to just above his knees. He could still see the faint light of the device on his chest shine through. Idly tapping his finger on the metal device, he looked around. He'll need some pants. Moving to the drawers, idly glancing at the picture frame on top showing the archer with a woman and 2 kids, smiling at the camera, he began opening each one until he managed to find black pants. Though they were long pants, far longer than his own legs, making him sigh. It's only until I get back to Konoha, he reminded himself, once more cursing his short stature, as well as his lack of kunai to cut. The legs so they were short enough to come down to his knees. Once he put the pants on, though they hung a bit due to being a bit larger than his waist and he rolled the legs up, Naruto decided to see. Heck out the arrow and bow sets out of curiosity. He couldn't really go anywhere with the door locked. Standing in front of the arrow display cases, he tilted his head. Reaching up, he took an arrow out. While he might not have any skill in weaponry aside from kunai and shuriken, he still found other weapons like swords cool. Arrows, while maybe not as cool, were still pretty useful. Turning to the bows, he pulled one down to look it over. Pretty cool, Datbeo, he muttered with an odd smile. Suddenly a loud bang was heard, startling him that he dropped the bow. Hearing sounds coming from behind the door, Naruto looked towards it. Looked like the people who kidnapped him noticed he was missing. He heard something or someone hitting the door. Open up, kid, he heard someone shout, though he couldn't understand them. Deciding to ignore them for now, he looked back at the arrow. He noticed that the tip was metallic and more round in width than a regular flat one. He raised a brow at that, wondering what the point of it was. He shrugged. Meh, what did he know about arrows, Datbeo? You better not be touching my stuff, brat. There has to be a way out of here, Naruto told himself, looking around the room. Unfortunately, other than the air vent and the currently stuck door, there was no other way out. Seriously, haven't these people ever heard of a window? He questioned, idly rubbing the tip of the arrow against the side of his head. Click, hum. Blinking at hearing a sudden clicking sound, Naruto moved his arm and the arrow out in front of him. The metal part of the arrow was blinking with red lights. What the? Beep, 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 beep. Naruto's eyes widened. While he didn't know what the beeping was about, if his instincts were right, then, acting quickly, he chucked the arrow away. The arrow soared through the air, before landing beside the bed on the floor. Beep, boom, whoa. Naruto waved his arms around, the resulting explosion, while small, taking him by surprise and pushing him back. Regaining his balance, he waved his arm to blow off the smoke from the blast. Blinking, he peered through the smoke as it began to disperse. There, on the floor, was a hole. Not too large, but wide enough to leap through, right into what is possibly a level below. Blinking once, twice, Naruto grinned at his new exit way. Chuckling, he jumped through, going down. Just as he left, the door burst into pieces, as Thor entered the room, his mighty hammer in hand, sparking. Behind him, Tony and Clint entered, the rich inventor sighing at his destroyed door, while Clint gasped in horror at the large hole in his floor. Oh, come on, Tony facepalmed. J-A-R-V-I-S. Where is the kid now? He asked, groaning. This day was becoming too damn long for his liking. How? After escaping from possible capture through the hole he intentionally made, Naruto dropped down into an empty room directly under the archer's own. Escaping into the hallway that was thankfully clear, he went down a random direction, still seeking a way out of the place he was in. Luckily, he hadn't run into any more guards, and after many twists and turns and checking just about every room, which unfortunately were empty and therefore of no help, he found himself standing before a door different from the others. For one, it was wooden instead of metallic like the others, the metal being a golden color. Second, it was a double set. Third, they were big, probably a quarter of the size of Konoha's gates. Lastly, it was glowing, like, seriously glowing. Now, Naruto was no door expert, but he was pretty sure doors shouldn't be glowing. Stared at the large, glowing, metallic doors, one thought in his mind. This has to be the way out, Datbeo. He thought, grinning. In the seal, Minato and Kushina facepalmed at their son's reckless thinking. While Kyuubi laughed, finding great enjoyment in all of this. Hands against the doors, Naruto pushed as hard as he could, grunting from the effort as the doors slowly opened. Bright light shining through the cracks, forcing him to close his eyes. Opening the doors as wide as he could, he paused, eyes clenched shut as the light became too much. Halting for a moment, he waited till his eyes adjusted, before slowly opening them. Once he did, he gasped. He thought the door would be an exit out of the place, and he was half right. Maybe the door did lead into a larger, open area, but he doubted it was to the outside. He stood in a massive golden place, the floor all shiny and gold like the door, reflecting his image, with a high arc ceiling, and fog. Yeah, for some reason a low fog or mist covered the ground a bit. At least in the entryway. There was a large opening leading somewhere, but it was all hidden in mist. Something tells me this is not an exit. Datbeo, he said, sweat dropping. He tensed, as a growl reached his ears. He looked around for the source of the growl, keeping his guard up. Just then, he noticed a shadow appear in the mist. The growl coming from it. What he saw come out of the mist. Well, let's just say he was not expecting. He honestly didn't know how to describe the thing that came from the mist. An animal, though clearly not like any he's seen before. And he's faced giant snakes and toads. It was green, walked on 4 legs. Wait. Make that 6 legs. Had several horns, spikes coming from its back. With a tuft of fur. On its back like some kind of mohawk. 2 large horns on the sides of its head. Hard to tell since he couldn't see a neck. Had a wide mouth. Finally, pure white eyes. No pupils visible, yet he could somehow feel the hunger in them as the creature stared at him. Yep. Definitely not an exit. He muttered, sweating nervously as the creature growled, before charging at him. Yelping, Naruto quickly turned around and ran back out the doors, grabbing them and pulling them close just as the creature leapt towards him. Luckily, he managed to close the doors shut just as the creature hit them, slamming them closed. The force pushed Naruto onto his back, groaning. Seriously, where in Kami's name am I? He exclaimed, getting very tired of the crap he's dealing with. Hey, who's there? Eyes widening at the sound of a voice, Naruto shot upward, quickly getting up. Turning to the direction of the voice, he froze as he stared at the angel, he muttered, staring at the form of a woman he thought he hallucinated. Cow, belief that should I increase the power output of my suit's miniaturization particles? Or, PIM particles, I could, theoretically, be able to shrink myself smaller than my current hymenopteron setting, and actually be able to shrink to the size of an atom, or even beyond that. Imagine it, to actually study atomic structures up close. To learn things previously impossible, too. It could change the field of science forever. Sounds great, Hank, Janet stated, trying to sound excited for her boyfriend, but in truth, she stopped trying to understand his science talk halfway through. For as much as she loved Hank and his brig brain, having a conversation with him always drove him into talking about his scientific theories and using words she sometimes thinks he makes up. Though she got the gist of it, he wanted to shrink super small. Smaller than an ant. It did sound pretty neat to her. With a yawn, Janet stretched her arms up. Things in New York have been quiet lately. No big bad villains have popped up, which she was surprised about. With the whole prison break from the 4 super prisons, the cube, the big house, the vault, and the raft, all owned by the secret not secret organization, S.H.I.E.L.D., Previo, USLY, containing many of Earth's most dangerous supervillains, only to all be broken out, somehow, simultaneously. Now approximately 74 villains are out and about with no knowledge of their locations. I'm surprised they haven't been attacking the city after breaking out, Janet thought, idly taking a bite out of her sandwich she made in the kitchen. Her life really took a turn since aliens attacked New York and the Avengers formed. Then just last month, supervillains all broke out from their prison cells in S.H.I.E.L.D. built prisons, with the only one returned being a madman with insane gravity powers. That guy was tough. Thankfully they had the Hulk show up to help take him down. And now recently, some ninja kid from another dimension literally dropped down on their doorstep, or more accurately, Their roof, looking like he came straight out of a war. How the hell can a month feel so eventful, yet so boring at the same time? She thought with another yawn. What she would give to have a supervillain appear so she could kick their ass. Her thoughts then turned to their new guest, who's been unconscious for the past week or so. I wonder how he'll act when he wakes up. Does he even know about his situation? That he's in another dimension. Will he be scared? Will he be hostile? How old is he anyway? He looked pretty young, maybe 12, and is he really a child soldier? Seriously, what kind of world did he come from to be a soldier at his age? The more she thought on it, the wilder her thought process ran, ideas and questions continuously popping and filling her head so much she barely heard Hank calling her name. Janet, Janet, blinking, Janet shook her head to clear away her thoughts as she turned to the concerned Hank. Sorry, what did you say? Hank frowned worriedly at her. Are you all right? I've been calling your name for the past minute. She sighed. Sorry, I was just thinking about everything that's been happening lately. Do you want to talk about it? You know I'm always here for you. Janet looked at him, smiling faintly in gratitude. It's just, Maji, kami no name wa doko ni iru no. The couple stopped, blinking at the sudden shout. What was that? Janet asked, and before Hank could say anything, the young petite woman was already moving towards the sound, making him sigh. He really wished Janet wouldn't be so reckless sometimes. With a slight shake of his head, he followed behind her. Turning the corner, Janet called out to whoever was there that shouted, when she was forced to come to a stop. Blinking as she stared ahead of her. There, in front of her, laying on the floor in front of the door to Thor's room, was the kid from another dimension she had just thought about. He was wearing clothes different from what he wore last time she saw him, a black shirt and pants, both looking too big for him, a glow coming from his chest that she recognized as Tony's arc reactor. Idly recalling Tony explaining to the team that was how the kid could be saved from his injured state. Tenshi, Janet exclaimed, blinking rapidly as she took a step back in surprise. Hearing what the kid muttered as he sat up, staring at her with a surprised expression. Her mind flashed back to her conversation with Natasha. It's Japanese for angel, Natasha said. A small faint blush appeared on her cheeks, feeling a bit embarrassed at being called an angel. Sure, she's been called cute a few times before for her petite figure as opposed to other women with more meat on their bodies like Natasha, who had a literal killer body, perfect for seducing men and women like the super spy she was. However, she has never been called something as insane as an angel before. Well, other than from her parents when she was a child, of course. Shaking her head, shaking off the small blush as well, Janet focused back on the tower's mysterious guest, as Hank finally joined her. The child? Hank asked, spotting the blonde, who tensed at his appearance. I thought he'd be in the infirmary. There was an alarm earlier. You think? Janet hinted. Hank frowned, humming. Either way, we should get him back to the med bay. He shouldn't be moving about in his state. He muttered, and took a step forward, making the blonde tense more, taking a half step back. Seeing this, Hank held his hands up. Easy now. I know this must all be confusing for you, but if you follow us back to the med bay, I promise that everything will be. Naruto did not give him the chance to finish as he charged forward. How? Naruto was momentarily stunned as he stared at the face of what he had thought was a pain, exhaustion-induced dream hallucination of an angel. To now learn that she was, in fact, real. Well, it left him a bit embarrassed, considering that he may have called her and that other woman with red hair, who may or may not be real as well, as such out loud before falling unconscious. So she may have heard him. Kami, damn it, me and my big mouth. He mentally cursed, a faint blush on his cheeks. Though, looking at her, he couldn't say he was lying. The woman, while a bit shorter compared to other women he's seen and known, as well as not as big as some like Tsunade Bachan, Kurenai Sensei, or T. Hat crazy long-tongued lady in the Chunin exam. She was still a smoking hot babe. Meanwhile, in the seal, seeing all of this, and hearing her son's thoughts, Kushina giggled madly. Minato cracking a small smile. It seems their son has had some influence from Kakashi and or Jiraiya. He quickly shook his head, trying to toss away that thought. Damn you, Ero Sennin. He cursed his perverted teacher, blaming him for thinking like that. The last thing he wanted was to start behaving like the perverted toad hermit. He got hit enough by Sakura-chan and Ba-chan. Focusing back, Naruto tensed when he saw another person suddenly appear, moving to stand by the woman in a black and yellow dress. While the woman had dark brown, a bit reddish, hair with the ends curved upward, the man had light brown hair. Wearing what looked like a red version of Rock Lee and Guy Sensei's one-piece suit with 3 bold black lines coming from the shoulders and pelvis and meeting at a large black circle in the middle of his chest. Black gloves and what might be black boots. He also wore what looked like a metal belt around his waist. A weird outfit, but still a lot better than the dreaded green one-piece of youth. He saw the man and woman having a conversation. He frowned, hearing a small bit of what they were saying, and once again, couldn't understand a single word. Damn code talk. This is becoming a headache. Datbeo. He grumbled, watching the two talk to one another before turning to him. The man suddenly took a step towards him, in turn making Naruto back up, watching the man warily. His hands flexed open and close, muscles tensing in preparation. Chances were these two could be trying to capture him for imprisonment. He once more cursed the fact and not having a weapon in hand or being able to use his chakra. Still, he thought as he narrowed his eyes, watching the man talk his nonsense words. His hands clenched tightly, taking a deep breath. No way I'm going down without a fight, Datbeo. If you follow us back to the med bay, I promise that everything will be. Whatever the man was saying, whatever his weird words could mean in his weird code language. Naruto ignored them as, with his leg strength honed throughout his long years of shinobi training, Naruto shot at the two, taking them by surprise not only for his action but also at the speed he showed. In the time it took them to blink, the young man they had kept in their line of sight moved in a blur, appearing less than a foot from them. Or more specifically, Hank. The bottom of his foot appeared less than 12 inches away from Hank's face. With a surprising hard slam, Hank was sent flying backward, hitting the metal ground with a slide, making Janet gasp before she turned to the short blonde. Hey, she exclaimed, but Naruto continued on, and dropping down, kicked Janet's legs from under her, causing her to fall on her butt. Sparing a glance at the two, Naruto turned and ran down the hall, ignoring the calls from the woman as he only sought to finally locate a way to escape wherever he was. Wait, Janet called to the whisker-faced blonde, watching as he ran down the hall. She turned toward Hank, who sat up from the ground, groaning as he held his face, his nose bleeding a bit and turning red. Hank, I'm going after him. Notify the others, she told him. Without giving him time to respond, Janet began to glow. She then started shrinking, her size and shape contracting until she became the size of a mouse. From her back, insect-like wings appeared, flapping hard and fast like a real insect. With a soft buzzing, the miniature Janet hovered in the air momentarily before flying down the hall after the mysterious kid, surprisingly moving in fast speed for her new small size. Getting up from the floor, Hank groaned, rubbing his nose with a wince. The kid sure had a hard kick. Shaking his head, he reached up to his ear where a comlink was. He had to notify Tony and Steve about their guest being awake, if they didn't know already. How? Tony groaned, massaging his forehead as he watched the live camer. A feed of their missing ninja from another dimension running down a hall of their tower with a shrunken Janet chasing after him. Kid's sure determined to get out of here. I just wish he'd slow a bit so we could explain things to him. He muttered, continuing to watch. He understood that things might seem strange to the kid, waking up in a place you don't even recognize, but they weren't going to hurt him or anything. J-A-R-V-I-S. Any luck translating the kid's language? He asked, bringing up recorded clips on the kid talking, few as they were, hoping they could watch them together to create a form of translation. From what he noted, the kid didn't understand English, only seemingly speaking Japanese, though it was sorta different from the modern language. It might be because the kid came from another realm, so their language, while similar, could have some differences. He wanted a 100% correct translation so as to not accidentally say the wrong thing and frighten the kid. Or possibly make things worse. Translation currently at 35%, sir. You were indeed correct that, While very much similar, current analysis on the boy's spoken words show so many differences with the modern Japanese alphabet. While not a complete difference, I'd suggest caution in using it to speak with him. I will require further sampling to have anything close to a 100% analysis. Hopefully Janet can get the kid to talk, Tony said, looking back at the feed, seeing Janet finally caught up with the kid. Also, where the hell was Cap? Cow, seriously, where the hell is the Kami Dam exit? Naruto muttered as he looked around, pausing in his running. So far, he has checked just about every room he could find on the floor, and he still couldn't find a way out. He even tried punching the wall, to no effect. He was starting to get ticked off with this situation. If only I could use my chakra, he said, glaring at the metal glowing plate on his chest. Its pulsing glow seemingly mocking him. He scratched his head angrily. Damn it, how the hell do I escape this place? Wait, Naruto blinked, hearing a voice. He turned around, facing the direction it came from. He frowned when he saw no one there, glancing around suspiciously. He thought it was that strange invisible voice from before, but this one sounded female. Shrugging, he decided not to pay it any attention and faced forward, only to jump back with a startled yelp, as inches from his face was a small woman. A familiar woman, the same woman from before, only small, really small, about the size of a kunai. Not to mention that she was floating in the air, having what looked like wings. What the? He stepped back, staring at the small woman with wide eyes. He has seen Choji use his clan's expansion jutsu before, but he's never seen someone do the exact opposite. Was this the lady's bloodline? He'll admit, it was pretty cool. Listen, please calm down. We're trying to help you, hey. She was cut off as she was forced to move out of the way as Naruto attempted to swipe at her. Cut it out. Naruto glared at the bee-themed dressed woman, backing up. Stop talking in your stupid code, Datbeo. Where am I? Why did you people kidnap me? What do you want? Please, just listen to me. Janet tried to calm him down, only to dodge another swipe. She continued to dodge swipes, as try as she might, she could not get the young blonde to settle down nor seize his attacks, which were starting to annoy her. I said quit it. Holding her arms up, the gauntlets on her wrists began to glow, before firing laser blasts. Low-powered, as she didn't want to hurt him too much. Ow! Naruto yelped as the tiny yellow energy blast struck his face. They didn't hurt, of course, though they did leave a sting with each impact. He tried to shield his face with his arms, trying to block them, only for the woman to fly around them, firing from another point. Ow! Ow! Cut it out! Finally stopping her assault, Janet let out a deep sigh, feeling calmer now. I'm sorry, but please. If you could just hey. She didn't get the chance to finish, as Naruto reached out to try and grab her, forcing her to move out of the way. That's not nice, Janet exclaimed, continuing to dodge. Growing annoyed, Janet retaliated as she fired her wasp stings at him. To her surprise, the blonde leaned back, dodging the laser blasts. Whoa, he's fast, she muttered. Leaning back up, Naruto jumped back, making space between them, glaring at the floating woman. This place is insane. Rooms that are huge inside with strange animals, and shrinking flying women that shoot lightning out of their hands. Could this be one of that Snake Pedo's bases or something? He muttered, his mind working fast with possibilities and ideas. He really couldn't remember what happened at the end of his battle with Sasuke, after Aloe Wing himself to be pierced through the chest by the Thames attack. For all he knew, he could have been captured and taken by Orochimaru's minions while he was out cold. Would explain the weird animal. Probably one of his sick experiments. Though he did find it strange that he hasn't run into either the snake or the traitorous spy Kabuto yet. Not that he was complaining really, at his errant state. Both still slightly weak and tired, as well as being unable to channel his chakra. He doubted he would be able to put much of a fight against a Sannin, much less Kabuto, who stated that he was even stronger than Kakashi. Whether or not Naruto believed the older teen's claim, he wasn't willing to try right now. With a glow, Janet grew back to her normal size, much to Naruto's surprise, hovering above the floor. Holding her arms straight apart. I don't want to fight you, but if I have to, I'll stop you here and now. I'm sorry, but you are in no shape to go anywhere. So Ust come with me and let's return to the med bay. Naruto growled, glaring at her. Quit talking in your stupid code, Datbeo. Talk normal, and tell me where that bastard Orochimaru is. Janet frowned at the words spoken by the blonde, coming to the realization that perhaps he couldn't speak English. Gonna have to try something else, she thought, before moving her hands in front of her, making Naruto tense. Preparing for another attack. Please, I'm not going to hurt you, she said gently. Slowly, she took off her gauntlets. Holding them up for him to see, Janet slowly knelt down, placing the gauntlets on the ground. The whole time, Naruto watched her, eyes narrowed, wondering what was happening. Janet stood up, hands open to show she didn't have any tricks. Please, you can trust me. I promise. I'm a friend, she said, giving him a soft smile. Naruto stared at her, wondering what he should do. This strange woman looked to be offering a friendly hand towards him. Now, Naruto may show compassion to enemies sometimes, like Haku and Gaara, but even he wasn't idiotic or blind enough to trust people he didn't know. That happens after he kicked their asses and show them their wrongdoings. Still, he thought as he looked at the auburn-haired woman, who continued to smile softly at him. This woman didn't seem to show any hostility towards him, for a seeming enemy. Maybe I haven't been captured by Orochimaru, he thought, slowly lowering his defenses, straightening up. After a moment of thinking, he gave the woman a nod. He'll take a risk and trust this woman, for now. Seeing the nod, Janet let out a sigh of relief, returning the nod. At least she calmed him down and prevented a fight. She slowly began approaching the young teen, taking her steps slow and steady so as to not startle him and set him off. Soon she stood merely a foot away from him, giving her the chance to look him over. The first thing she noticed about him was that he was short, even shorter than her own height of 5 feet 4. He looked to be about 4 feet 5. The second thing was that he had quite a peculiar appearance. Wild, almost spiky she would say. Bright golden yellow hair, thought a bit dirty and in need of washing, like a miniature sun as it jolted out in different directions, and what might be the brightest blue eyes she has ever seen. It was like staring at the ocean. She didn't think even Thor or Cap's own blonde hair and blue eyes were as bright as this kid's. Speaking of eyes, while she wasn't an expert in reading people's emotions through their eyes like Steve or Natasha, she did note that the kid's eyes held a glint. A strong look of maturity she could say, similar to Steve. Maturity no kid should have. Maturity found only in grown men, or child soldiers. She frowned at that thought, remembering that this young child in front of her could be a soldier of war. No child should go through war so young, or any kind of conflict. Children should be enjoying their life free and happy, not fighting battles. It's not right, she thought, looking down at the blonde, who stared up at her with cautious and strong eyes. That doctor guy said that he came from another reality or realm. He's alone here, alone and hurt. She glanced at the shining arc reactor glowing through his shirt. Looking back up at his eyes, Janet made a vow. I'll help him. That's what an Avenger does, right? They help people in need. That's what being a hero means. Right now his kid needs the life taken from him avenged, and the others and I will be the heroes he needs. She thought determinedly, raising her hands up towards him. Come with me. Naruto looked at the hand held out towards him, frowning. While he couldn't understand the words she spoke, he understood the meaning behind her actions. She was telling him to go with her, to trust her. It could be a trap, he thought, but did he have any other choice? He might get answers if he went with the woman. Find out where he was. Other than the chakra disruption device on his chest, these people haven't hurt him or anything. He also didn't wake up in a prison cell like in his mission in the land of snow. He clenched his hand, thinking. In the seal, Minato and Kushina watched their son's scene with rapt attention. Naru-chan, Kushina muttered, hands pressed over her chest. Trust her, trust them, maybe. Looking at the woman, he slowly began to raise his hand. His hand shook with caution as it neared the woman's own. He hoped he didn't regret this. Cow, I swear when I get my hands on that kid. Clint hissed through gritted teeth as he stomped through the hallway. Pissed about the new hole in his room floor. Now he was on the hunt for the whisker-faced blonde brat to make him pay. Calm yourself, friend Hawkeye. I'm sure it was merely an accident, Thor said, walking behind the fuming archer, joining him in locating the tower's missing guest. Though unlike his teammate, Thor was in the need to ensure the boy was well, given his prior state. Did the kid really blow a hole in your floor? Sam Wilson, 3, asked curiously, brow raised. He had run into the two after finishing his training session in the tower's training room and was brought up to speed on what was going on, including what had occurred in Hawkeye's room. Yes, Clint practically yelled, anger in his voice. A freaking hole, right on my bedroom floor. And I'm not talking about a small one either. The brat must have been messing with my arrows and set off an explosive one. Now I have to wait for it to be fixed. Seriously, why did he have to go into my room? An honest mistake, I'm sure, Thor said, waving off Clint's words with an amused chuckle. What is important now is locating the child to make sure he is all right, he stated, getting a nod from Sam. And a growl from Clint, having other ideas on what he'll do when he finds the kid. Seriously, a hole in his floor. Was he the only one focusing on that? Turning a corner, the three men stopped. Ahead of them, they spotted their teammate, Janet. Not only that, but in front of her was the young man they've been looking for. There he is, Clint stated, glaring at the brat, fingers twitching with the urge to shoot an arrow at him. He wouldn't hurt the kid, of course, just spook him a little. Teach him a lesson in invading another person's privacy and touching their stuff. Smiling joyfully, Thor held up an arm, calling out, "Excellent work, Wasp. I see thou hast located our guest," he announced loudly, getting their attention. At the presence of new arrivals, Naruto flinched, his hand moments away from touching Janet's. With wide eyes, Naruto pulled back, taking a step back. Janet turned around, seeing her teammates approaching her. Gasping, she turned back to Naruto, seeing the tension return on his face. "Wait," she began, but was too late as the blonde turned around and ran down the hall. "No, Tilda," she moaned, seeing her work in calming him down go down the drain. Turning to the approaching Thunderer, she glared at him. "Thor, look what you did. You scared him off." Flinching at her glare, the Asgardian rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "Apologies, Wasp. I had no such intention to scare the young lad away. Worry not, I, the god of thunder, shall bring him for you," he declared, fist against his chest in his vow. Holding out his mighty hammer, Thor gripped the strap tightly and began to spin the hammer around till it was a blur. One could almost hear the sound of thunder outside the tower. "Thor, wait, Jane," she began but was unable to finish as in a blur, the Asgardian shot down the hall with a jolly laugh, making the woman groan, facepalming. "I got a bad feeling about this," she groaned. Unknown to her, on his way running, Naruto ran into Hank. Before the scientist could try to capture him, he was kicked in the face for the second time, the force knocking out, with the laughing ninja going around him. Cow, that was a mistake, Naruto told himself as he ran. Whether he was referring to placing his trust in a stranger while in a hostile environment, or running off at the first sight of the new arrivals, even he didn't know. The woman seemed kind, but when he saw the three men coming their way, he panicked and acted without thinking, turning tail and running off, ignoring the woman calling after him. He was running on instinct and his training to guide him, as being unable to understand these people, it left him lost in communication, unable to trust in their words. Deception is a shinobi's greatest tool, but also their worst enemy, he thought, recalling the piece of advice given to him by old man Hokage, back when he was little. For many years, he didn't understand the meaning behind the man's words, not until the accident with Mizuki. How his teacher, someone he trusted for many years, tricked him into stealing the forbidden scroll of sealing, then tried to kill him and Iruka-sensei after revealing to Naruto of his status as the container of the Kyuubi, a secret kept from him since his birth, but used as an excuse to be a target for the village's misjudged hatred. Then there was Kabuto, a seemingly fellow Konoha shinobi at first during his first time in the Chunin exams, approaching him and his fellow rookies with a kind smile and hand of friendship, only to later be revealed to be in league with the dreadful snake Sanin. Deception. Truly it was a deadly tool. You never really knew who was really friend or foe. But that woman, Naruto thought, frowning. Thinking back to her smile directed towards him, her hand stretched out for him to grab. Her mouth moving, words coming out, but unreadable to him. She didn't seem like she was tricking me, but neither did Kabuto at first. He shook his head, groaning. He was getting a headache from all this thinking. Right now, he needed to concentrate on finding an exit. Then he could. His eyes widened as his instincts screamed at him. He threw himself forward, dropping to the metal ground, as something big flew over him. Raising his head, he lifted a brow when he saw the muscular blonde man in the cape standing before him, his fierce-looking stone hammer in hand. He stared at the man's back for a second, before the man turned around to face him. "Shit," he muttered. "Cow, Kuso." Thor heard as he turned to face the blonde child, laying on the floor. He smiled as he looked at the boy. He appeared to be in better condition than when he first appeared. Something Thor was glad for. "Ah, child, thou hast worried us. Thou shouldn't leave the chamber of medicine so suddenly," he said as the younger blonde with the blonde and strange lines on his face stood up. Narrowing his eyes at him. "Sabarashi, Kimyona Hanashi o Suru Betsu no Kimyona Kodo. Anata wa Hitobido ga Watashi ni Nani o Nazan Iru Notisu ka." Great, another weird code-talking weirdo. "What do you people want from me?" the boy asked, making Thor frown, unable to understand him, at least not fully. To his ears, he heard, "Weird old wing." He found that strange, as normally he would be able to understand any language in the 9 realms with the Owlspeak, gifted to him by his father, Odin. With it, he could understand all of Earth's separate tongues, and those beyond the universe. Yet, for some reason, the boy's language seemed broken to his ears. Curious, he muttered, rubbing his chin. "I suppose I should take you to Stark," he said, taking a step to approach the boy. Naruto suddenly leapt at him, arm pulled back for a punch. Throwing his fist forward, he had thought that the man would be distracted by his attack to stop it. Like the other man had, only to go wide-eyed, when his fist was caught by the man's large hand. Blinking, Naruto looked up at the large man, who stood as large as Arrow Sennin. His head barely reaching the man's chest, who stared down at him with a disapproving frown. "That was not wise, child. While I would normally applaud such bravery and ferocity for combat, you should not fight your saviors," Thor scolded him. Sweating lightly, Naruto decided to forego fighting this man and go with a tactical retreat. Hopping up, he planted his feet against the man's chest, using it as a platform to jump off of, freeing his hand from the man's grasp. Backflipping through the air, he landed away from the man. He turned around to run another direction, only to find the other men and the woman from before standing behind him. Looking at both sides, Naruto saw that he was surrounded. "Kuso, you ain't going anywhere, kid," Clint stated, aiming an armed arrow at him. Janet had scolded him when she saw him pull it out, but he calmed her down when he said it was merely to intimidate the kid, while the arrow was a tranquilizer arrow to knock him out. He wasn't really going to fire it unless he needed to. That didn't stop her from giving him a nasty look. Naruto clicked his tongue in annoyance, seeing no way out. He lowered his stance, ready for anything. He glanced around, hoping to find something, anything to aid him right now. Luckily, he found it as his eyes landed on a ventilation shaft near the floor to his left. Large enough for him to slip into. He made sure his observation was unnoticed as he turned back to the group surrounding him, his eyes landing on the woman, who stepped up. "We're not going to hurt you," she said, holding her hands up, trying to calm him like before, this time making sure the others didn't interrupt her. Naruto looked at her, glancing at the 2 men behind her, especially the archer, who was giving him a nasty look. The man with dark skin and metal vest watched on silently, possibly ready to step in if needed. Glancing over his shoulder, he eyed the muscular blonde man, who stood there, arms crossed. Turning back to the woman, Naruto gave her a small smile. "Sumimasen, Minazen. Anata wa Suteki na Yotasuga, Watashi wa Koko ni Amasen, Datbeo." "Sorry, miss, you seem nice, but I'm outta here, Datbeo." Closing parenthesis. Janet cringed her eyes in confusion, wondering what he was saying. However, before she could say anything or the others did something, Naruto turned on his heel, facing the side, and shot forward. Seeing him move, Clint acted and fired at arrow as the boy leapt at the wall. He seemingly was going to hit the wall, only for him to throw himself down. The arrow flying mere centimeters from his head, as he slid across the floor, colliding against a low vent, breaking through it. "Hey!" Clint shouted. "By Odin's beard!" Thor exclaimed. "Seriously?" Sam sounded. Janet gasped. "Wait!" she called. With her wings flapping, she shot forward, shrinking down to the size of a bee, and followed after the blonde teen into the vent, leaving the three men alone in the hallway, glancing at one another. "What the hell just happened?" Clint asked. "How? J-A-R-V-I-S. Tony asked. Translation at 85%, sir. "It'll have to do," Tony asked, turning around and moved to exit the room. "Send the translation to my helmet. Hopefully, it'll be enough to calm the kid down before anything bad happens." "Where is he now?" "Sensors indicate the patient is in the air vents. Sir, the patient has dropped rapidly and is heading towards your lab." "What? Crap. Better get there fast. The last thing I need is the kid blowing a hole in my room." How? Moment ago with Naruto, once more finding himself crawling through the dirty, dust-filled air vents, Naruto wondered where he should go now. If I remember right, air vents led outside, either to the building side, or the roof. So, if I keep following this way, it should lead me out, he thought, smirking at his plan. He began to crawl forward, the only direction he had until he came across an opening or change in direction. As he crawled, he could have sworn he heard a buzzing in his ear. Shaking his head, he focused forward. Suddenly, the miniature form of the woman in the black and yellow dress appeared in front of his face, making him yelp, jumping, which only served to make him hit his head against the vent roof. "Itai, ouch," he hissed, rubbing the top of his head. Hearing the woman giggle, he glared at her. "Kimi wa, anata wa koko de nani o shiteiru no. Mohitori ni shite oit, datbeo. What are you doing here? Leave me alone already, datbeo." Closing parenthesis. Ceasing her laughter, Janet looked at the whiskered blonde. While being unable to understand what the teen was saying, his facial expression gave her a hint, making her cross her arms. "If you would stop running all over the place, you'd understand that I'm trying to help you." She glared at him while leaning forward slightly, pressing her bottom lip out slightly in a pouty angry look. Blinking, Naruto didn't understand what the woman's deal was, though he recognized the look. He mostly got them from Shizune when the woman expressed her disapproval. Usually aimed at him and or Tsunade when they did something she did not like, be it eating too much ramen for him, or drinking too much sake for the latter. He leaned away from the glaring woman, not sure what to do. Anata wa hen na joshi dezu. Opening parenthesis. "You're a weird lady," he muttered. Shaking his head, he moved to pass Janet. "Seriously, you're just going to ignore me and move on?" she asked, stumped by the teen's inability to stop. Naruto did in fact ignore her as he kept crawling. Growling in annoyance, Janet flew in front of his face, halting him. What is it with men being so reckless and ignoring when someone's trying to help them? Naruto frowned at her, narrowing his eyes. "Ugoku, move. Glare at me all you want, I'm trying to help you. And if you can't understand me, I'll just make you understand," she threatened. Narrowing his eyes further, Naruto attempted to gently swat her aside. This only angered Janet more as she dodged the hand. With a growl, she fired low-powered energy stings at him, making Naruto yelp from the hits. "Yamate, quit it." He swiped at her to get her to stop, only for her to swoop out of the way. Continuing to fire, the two went back and forth, Janet firing at Naruto from annoyance and the blonde trying to block her assaults while attempting to move forward. Unfortunately, the assault distracted Naruto from seeing where he was going, and didn't see the drop in front of him. He yelped as an energy sting hit him in the butt. "No Masuko ah, son of a," with a startled yell. He fell down the drop. "Oh shit," Janet exclaimed, quickly flying down the shaft. How? Within Tony's built lab in the Avengers Tower, Steve Rogers stood in front of a table, arms crossed. He stared silently at the contents laid out on the table. Said contents were the items found on the young boy. 2 pouches, one thinner and longer than the other. 3 Japanese triangular kunai blades. 5 star-shaped metal shuriken. A roll of medical tape. 2 small scrolls the size of a quarter. A strange what he asked Med to be a frog-shaped wallet filled with what seemed like bills and coins, which he noted looked very similar to the Japanese currency, and a headband with a metal plate with a swirl design carved in the middle. Guess his world really is similar to feudal Japan. Still, for someone so young to be trained as a soldier, he muttered with a frown. We can't exactly question the culture and workings of other worlds, Cap. He heard behind him. Turning around, he saw the recent youngest Avenger approach. Carol. He nodded in greeting as the former United States Air Force officer moved to stand at his side, looking down at the items. Reaching forward, she picked up the headband. It seemed fairly worn out, having cuts and gashes all over the metal. She ran her fingers against the cold metal, passing over the carving in the center. I get what you're saying, but it still feels wrong. I didn't join the army until I was 18. That boy couldn't look any older than 12. Steve said. Not looking away from the headband, Carol responded. I get it, I do, but there's not much we can do about it. Trust me, I don't like the idea of a boy that young being trained to fight in wars and kill. It's not right by our standards. But we can't really change how a world works, no matter how much we want to. She stated. Steve sighed, conceding with her point, as well as surprised by her smart logic and wisdom. I get it. I suppose it's just the veteran in me. I fought in a war to ensure that no child would be forced to fight as I have. To take lives. To fight in wars and be forced to watch their friends fall before them. Bucky. Closing his eyes, Steve breathed in deeply. Even after everything he has experienced and learned since being defrosted and awakening in this new time, the memory of that event still haunts him. Turning to him, the younger blonde opened her mouth to say something, when the two suddenly heard something. Raising their heads, they idly listened as the sound of banging and screaming reached their ears, coming from the ceiling. What the? Carol questioned. With a mighty crash, the two saw something burst through the air vent, crashing hard against the floor behind them, kicking up a cloud of dust. The two tensed, getting in guarded stances, wondering who or what would crash before them. Staring at the cloud of dust, the two could hear the sound of groaning coming from it. Ainikeru junbi ga dekimashita, bachan tilde. I'm ready to go home now, Granny tilde. Closing parenthesis. The dust soon cleared, and the two heroes blinked as they looked upon the form of the very person they were just talking about, comically laying face down on the floor, his face planted to the metal floor. They glanced at one another, unsure of what to think. Naruto. They heard a voice from the very vent the child dropped from, and raising their heads, they saw Janet come on in her tiny form. Oh no, is he okay? She asked, worried. Carol looked at the groaning teen. Seems alive to me, she said, walking towards him. Getting close, she nudged him with her foot, getting a loud groan. You all right there? She asked him. Watashi wa ima made de sayaku no uno moda nakari banaramasan, datbeo. I have to have the worst luck ever, datbeo. Naruto grumbled, rolling himself over. He started up at the form hovering over him. Dazed from his fall. Betsu no tenshi. Another angel, he mumbled. Huh? Carol asked, raising a brow at his words. Blinking, Naruto snapped out of his dazed state. His vision clearing better. Getting a better look at the stranger over him, his eyes widened. Carol yelped, leaning back as the blonde male teen sat up in a blur, narrowly avoiding their heads colliding. Hey, watch it, she exclaimed, glaring at him as the teen quickly got up to his feet, turning to face her, watching her warily. His caution increased once he noticed Cap behind her. Mato anata no hito. More of you people, he asked, narrowing his eyes at them. Steve stepped forward, hands up in a show of nonviolence, Janet landing beside him, growing to her full size. Easy, son, we're not going to hurt you. Quite the opposite actually. Already tried that, Cap. Janet told him, keeping her eyes on Naruto. Naruto stared at the man, watching his every move, along with the blonde lady beside him. They both had blonde hair, the man with short, while the teen's hair flowed down to her back, and blue eyes, like the other muscular man from before. Which surprised him a good bit with the number of blue-eyed blondes this place had. Back home, the only other people he knew in Konoha with blonde hair and blue eyes were the Yamanaka clan. The man's muscular physique made him a bit nervous, knowing he might not be able to fight him head-on alone, as the man seemed to be well trained in combat, and with no clones to help him. He growled, anger filling him. He was powerless, unable to use his chakra, didn't know where he was or how to contact Konoha. He really wasn't liking his situation. The man wore what seemed like a military-style outfit, looking something like mesh armor under some kind of fabric. It was colored mostly blue with bits of white and red. He also had brown heavy-duty boots and armored gloves with straps over his shoulders and belt around his waist. On his chest was a design of a white star. Last but not least, he had a wide round shield of the same color scheme strapped to his back. In Naruto's honest opinion, the red, white, and blue made the man stand out even more than his orange jacket. It didn't, really. His eyes turned to the blonde female. She looked to be around his age, a few years older than him maybe. She's kinda cute, he couldn't help but think, a slight red hue on his cheeks, before pushing it down. He shouldn't be admiring possible enemies. Damn Ero Sennin. Her attire was less guarding than the man and kinda revealing. Considering all she seemed to wear was a black sleeveless leotard with a large yellow lightning bolt design in the front, long black elbow-length gloves, and thigh-high black boots, leaving her upper thighs exposed. On her face, she had what looked like a mask, covering her eyes in white fabric to shield them. The final piece she had was a long red sash wrapped around her waist, the ends trailing in the air freely. It took all his willpower not to stare at the exposed skin for longer than a second, his cheeks burning red. Even more when he noted that the leotard was skin-tight, and helped show off her moderately large chest. Ero Sennin would have a field day with her outfit, he thought, knowing his perverted teacher as he did. Not that he could really blame the old perv, with the way the blonde was dressed. Still, for seemingly not looking well protected, the older teen had a good amount of muscle on her arms, well-toned legs, and abs under her outfit, showing she had to be pretty strong. Carol seemed to notice his eyes rolling over her form, and crossed her arms, glaring at him. "Hey, eyes up, brat," she shouted. However, something caught his attention from the group. Something that drew his eyes. Something in the female teen's hand. Something metallic. His eyes widened when he recognized his headband in the blonde's grasp. "Watashi no Katyusha, my headband," he suddenly shouted, taking them by surprise. Glaring at the stunned teen, Naruto pointed at the headband. "Watashi no Monodezu, that's mine." Closing parenthesis. Carol blinked, looking down at the headband in her hand. "Oh, this yours, right?" I was just looking. Raising her head, her eyes widened as Naruto charged at her. "Hey, wait, Koro Toru, take this." With a shout, he threw a hard punch at Carol. Acting quickly, Carol raised her hand, catching the punch. Surprisingly, she felt a bit of force behind the punch, enough that it blew her hair back. With wide eyes, she stared down at fierce blue eyes glaring up at her. His other hand clenching, he threw it forward. With her hand holding the headband, Carol put her arm up, blocking the fist with her forearm. "Hey, knock it off, kid. I don't want to hurt you," she told him firmly, glaring back. Clicking his tongue, Naruto jumped upward, smashing his forehead hard against Carol's nose, making her let out a cry of pain and shock. She staggered backward, holding her nose. "Damn brat." In her surprise, Carol had released her hold on the headband, dropping it on the floor with a clank. Seeing it, Naruto quickly grabbed it, leaping back to make space between him and the strangers, smiling down at his headband. "Yosh, all right," he muttered, tying it around his forehead. Feeling the material against his forehead made him grin, feeling better. As Carol rubbed her nose, Cap stepped forward. "That's quite enough," he spoke, getting Naruto's attention. Steve raised his hands up in a non-threatening manner. "You might not be able to understand me, but I need you to listen. We are not your enemies." Naruto frowning, pointing a straight finger at him. "Demare, mo henana hanashi o kikitakunai. Watashi ga doko ni iru no ka, so shita nada no hitobito wa darena no ka shiratai." Shut up, I don't want to listen to any more of your weird talking. I want to know where I am, and who you people are?" he demanded, glaring at the three adults before him. Just then, he noticed something behind them. "Watashi no Mono, my stuff," he declared, seeing this missing stuff laid out on the table behind them, making him glare at them. "Watashi wa anata ga hitobito ga yokunai koto o shitamashita. I knew you people weren't good." Closing parenthesis. "Now hold on a min," Steve began to say, but Naruto wouldn't allow him to finish. With a push of his strong legs, gaining more energy than before, he ran towards them, intent for violent confrontation in his eyes. Steve met his charge by stepping into his line of fire, preparing to disable the young child and hold him. However, never say that Naruto didn't learn from his past mistakes. As he got close, Naruto pulled back his arm, seemingly aiming for a punch with Steve ready to block it. However, in a surprising move, the younger blonde suddenly dropped, sliding across the floor between Cap's parted legs, with the hero stunned by the sudden action. Getting behind him, Naruto quickly got up, pushing off the ground and leaping towards Steve. Leg swinging sideways for a sidekick. Shaking his surprise off, Steve quickly raised his arm, blocking the kick. Not letting that stop him, Naruto pushed his horizontal aligned body into a roll, kicking out his other leg towards the man's head. Thanks to his military training, Steve stopped the leg with his other arm. Unfortunately, with both his arms occupied, this left him open for attack. Something Naruto capitalized on when he slammed his entangled hands on top of Steve's head, making the man go wide-eyed in surprise and pain, and the women gasped. With his legs free, Naruto placed his hand on Cap's shoulder and used it to pull himself in over his back. He kicked off Cap's back, his feet stomping against the round shield on his back, pushing T. He man forward in a stagger while the blonde shinobi backflipped into the air. He soared over the stunned women, landing in front of the table. Standing up, he quickly turned and gathered his things from the table. Now he just had to find his orange jacket. "Hey!" Janet shouted at him as Cap got his balance. With his kunai and shuriken pouches supplied and strapped onto his back, waist and right leg, the latter with medical tape, Naruto turned to the three facing him, narrowing his eyes. Taking a kunai out, he spun it around his finger, grasping it and holding it in a reverse hold in front of him. Getting in a defensive stance. He'll likely have to fight his way out. Seeing that the kid wasn't going to back down without a fight, Cap unstrapped the shield from his back, placing it on his arm. While Carol got in a stance, her hands glowing. "Wait!" Janet shouted, getting between the three blondes, arms out. She looked at them. "Can we all just calm down for a sec? Seriously, this whole day has been so stressful for her." She looked at her teammates. "He's just a confused kid. You can't hurt him." "We don't plan to hurt him, Wasp," Cap told her. "We at least need to knock him out." "Well, maybe hurt him a little," Carol muttered, still a bit miffed about the head to the nose thing. "Let me just calm him down," Janet told them, looking back at the silent Naruto, who stared at them with narrowed eyes, but made no move to attack. "He'll listen to me." "How can you be so sure about that?" Cap asked her, not looking away from the strange child. The boy was well trained. That much was obvious. They shouldn't underestimate him. Janet was silent for a bit, staring at Naruto, who stared back. She lowered her arms, turning fully to him. "Just trust me," she told them, begged them. She knew the boy was probably feeling a whole storm of emotion, but she hoped she could get through to him like before. Cap and Carol glanced at each other, silently communicating. Before Cap turned to Wasp, sighing. "All right, do what you have to do. We'll watch your back." Nodding, Janet slowly took a step towards Naruto, making him tense. Hand tightening around the handle of his blade. She raised her hands. She took another step forward. Seeing he wasn't making any more attempts to run away, she continued to slowly approach him, keeping eye contact. "I know you can't understand me," she began, keeping her words slow and steady, almost like she was approaching a lion. "You're confused, I know. You probably want answers, and so do we." She now stood less than 5 feet from him, with Naruto keeping a tight grip on his kunai, ready for any surprises. "We want to help you, but you need to calm down. Please," she told him gently. Now a foot away, she slowly moved her hand forward, gently placing it on the hand holding the knife, making him flinch. Still, the two maintained eye contact. Staring into Janet's eyes, Naruto frowned. "Watashi, Anata, you," he muttered, trying to move his hand, yet for some reason, he couldn't. Janet gave him a soft smile. With her other hand in view, she slowly and steadily reached forward and pressed her palm against Naruto's chest, over the arc reactor in his chest. Blinking, he looked down at it, before raising his gaze to her. "We're not going to hurt you. I promise," she muttered, slowly pushing his arm and weapon down to his side. Naruto frowned, keeping his gaze on her, glancing at the two older blondes behind her standing silently. Before turning his gaze back to her, he stared into her eyes, seeing nothing but compassion and warmth, as well as a gentle plea to listen to her words, no matter how much he couldn't understand. Yet for some reason, he did. Suddenly, he felt tired. Incredibly so, his shoulders dropping. His lips dropped with a heavy, tired frown. After a moment, he nodded, looking up at her. "Watashi wa, Anata o shinjimasu. I trust you." Closing parenthesis. His words were soft, tired, hesitant, yet, they made Janet smile. Behind her, Cap and Carol let out a heavy breath of relief. Unknown to them, in a corner of the room, hidden by the shadows, one hidden Black Widow lowered her pistols, seeing the situation had been handled. She had been following the young ninja since he escaped from Clint's room, watching him from a distance, observing him, studying him, ready to act should she have to. However, it seems drastic action was no longer needed. Still, she will still need to keep her eye on him. "Well, it looks like you guys calmed down our renegade realm guest." Naruto flinched, hearing a strange voice. Turning his head towards the source, his spine straightened as he witnessed a new figure enter the chamber. This one was heavily armored from head to toe. They were a full set of metal plating, making him think they were a samurai, like Iruka-sensei once described. Their armor was colored fully red with some gold-colored plates, all smooth-looking and well-crafted. Their face was completely covered, with their eye holes glowing ominously. Behind the armored being, were the rest of the enemies he ran into earlier. Janet felt Naruto tense as he glanced at her. She offered him a comforting smile. "It's okay," she whispered gently to him. "They're friends." Naruto looked back at the group of men as they walked their way, joining the older blondes. "Watashi wa kor ni te suita yana omoi o shimashita, datbeo." "I got a bad feeling about this, datbeo," he muttered, eyeing the group. "Good to see you on your feet, kid," Iron Man said, looking at the short teen, who stared at him warily. Looking at the tall armored person, Naruto felt nervous. Even more when he saw that he was surrounded by the other strange adults, the woman's hand on his own being the only thing preventing him from trying to leave. Her grip gentle yet firm to hold him in place. He looked around at the group, as they all stared back at him with different expressions, from calm to calculating, to slight annoyance from the archer. But mostly curiosity. Naruto frowned, eyeing them all, before turning to the brunette woman, asking, "Anata dare dezu ka, who are you people?" Closing parenthesis. How? Inside the seal, Minato and Kushina let out heavy sighs of relief. "Glad that's over, Datbane," Kushina said as she held her head, her husband nodding in agreement. "Hopefully Naruto will listen to these people and not pick any more fights," he said, knowing their son was not in the best of shapes with what happened to his chakra network. He then frowned, a thought occurring to him. Why were he and Kushina still there? When he implanted the remnants of their chakra into Naruto prior to their deaths, it was for the intent of helping him with the Kyuubi should the need come and to have one final reunion with him. It wasn't to be for long, as they only had enough chakra for a few minutes. Yet, for the better part of perhaps several days, the two had stayed there, in their son's seal, with no sign of dissolving. He frowned, having some theories, and if he was right. "Looks like we might get our chance to spend more time with Naruto like we wanted. A lot more time. Anata dare dezu ka, who are you people?" Closing parenthesis. The voice of the Avengers Tower's newest and mysterious guest rang through the chamber of Tony's lab, cutting through the tense silence like a hot knife through butter. However, the meaning behind those words was lost to those unable to understand the child's presumably Japanese language, lacking the knowledge to fully understand them. The group of the Heroic Avengers stood surrounding a young spiky-haired blonde male teen with strange whisker-like lines on his face, wearing dark clothes obviously too big for his size and hanging loose from the neck, with a visible glow coming from his chest. Though they surrounded the boy in the hope to prevent him from running off and prompting another chase scene, the adults tried to appear as non-threatening to him as possible. Something that wasn't really working, given the teen's tense shoulders and flickering gaze towards the entrance, no doubt plotting to charge his way towards it if necessary. The only reason the kid hadn't tried to run off was Janet's hand on his, keeping him in place, like some kind of leash. Her grip was tight and firm, not letting go, no matter how much the young man kept tugging. Still, Tony wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth. Besides, this gives him the chance to see if his upgraded translator worked. J-A-R-V-I-S. Beginning translation, sir. His faithful A.I. said. On his helmet's HUD, Tony watched as his program worked to translate the kid's words, analyzing the recorded speech from the child's statement and crow. Referencing them with known Japanese words and phrases. After a second or two, the translation appeared on the screen. The kid wanted to know who they were. Simple enough translation. Now, how to respond. All right, begin translating. Of course, sir. Raising an armored hand to his helmet, Tony jokingly coughed, before raising a hand in greeting to the short boy. Nice to see you up, kid. The name's Tony. Tony Stark. Yoroshiku onge shimasu. Kodomo. Tony ni name o sukumasu. Tony Sudaku. Nice see up, kid. Name Tony. Tony Stark. Naruto blinked confusingly at the armored guy, hearing him speak in his strange code like the others. However, to his surprise, he then began to hear familiar words. Well, partially. Nay tilde. Tony Sudaku. Tony smiled, glad that his translation system seemed to be working. Not that he doubted his genius, of course. It obviously worked to perfection. He built it after all. See, worked like a charm, Tony exclaimed, gloating a bit as he looked at Steve, who had previously expressed doubts about his system being able to accurately translate the kid's language. Steve crossed his arms over his chest, holding a lingering expression of doubt. The given evidence wasn't really much proof that the child understood Tony or vice versa. Still, he will give Tony the benefit of the doubt. The sound of someone snorting got everyone's attention. If by work, you mean confusing the kid even more, then sure, Tony. Everyone turned their heads, and Naruto blushed as he saw who he had thought was a tired, pain-filled Delis. Ion of an angel as everyone spotted the famed assassin, spy Natasha approaching the group. Naruto couldn't help but observe the woman. She moved in a way that even he, a genin, could tell she was as strong and deadly as Kakashi-sensei. With a feeling of mystery about her. While not in a pervy way, as he ran his eyes down her body, he was reminded of Kiba's sensei, Kurenai, and that strange proctor woman from the Chunin exam. She possessed an hourglass body as Ero Sennin would say, yet he had a feeling it was more for a distraction than just looking good. Like when he used his sexy jutsu, both as a prank, but also as a way to take enemies by surprise. Only, instead of a prank, this woman probably used her body as a weapon, perhaps even deadlier than a kunai. Still, he couldn't help but look at her with awe. She really did look like an angel, especially with her long red hair, mesmerizing him a bit, but before he quickly snapped out of it. He fidgeted as her blue eyes looked at him, turning his head away while trying, and failing, to push down his blush. Hearing the other woman beside him giggling, no doubt noticing his blushing, only served to embarrass him even more. Feeling some amusement from the kid's embarrassment when he looked at her, the corner of Natasha's lip twitched upward slightly, before she looked at Tony, crossing her arms. Your translation was barely intelligible. His faceplate snapped open, revealing to Naruto a grown man with short dark hair and an equally dark beard and mustache as Tony pouted at Natasha. Hey, come on, the kid understood me. Right, kid? He asked, turning to Naruto, who just blinked at him. Nani? See, Tony said, thinking the kid agreed with him. Natasha rolled her eyes at him, before looking at the blonde teen. She moved closer to him, making him flinch. Kneeling down to get near his eye level, she gave him a small smile. Konnichiwa, Shinpai Shinade Kudasai, Dare mo anata o kizutsukuru sumori wa aramasen. Watashi wa anata ga osoraku konran shiteru koto o shitamasu. Watashidachi mo onaji dezu. Watashidachi wa anata ga subit o rikai suru no o tasukuru tame nisaizen o sukushimasu. Hello. Don't worry, no one is going to hurt you. I know you're probably confused. So are we. We'll do our best to help you figure everything out. She told him, earning a frown from him. His eyes reflecting his conflicting feelings. Continuing to smile at him, she placed a hand on her chest. Romanofu Natasha, she introduced herself. She then gestured to her team. Abenjazu, Avengers. Naruto glanced at the other adults. The Avengers, apparently their group was called. Not that it really helped fix the confusion he felt. But presumably, they were the good guys. Probably. However, that didn't explain where he was, how he got there from his fight with Sasuke, or what the thing stuck to his chest was. He took a step back, abruptly pulling his hand out of the shrinking woman's grip, as he narrowed his eyes at everyone. Uzumaki Naruto. Ima. Watashi wa kote ga hoshidezu. Watashi wa doko ni iru no. Anata wa watashi ni nani o shimashita ka. Nanda. Core. Uzumaki Naruto. Now, I want answers. Just where am I? What have you people done to me? What is this thing? He demanded, shouting as at the end, he pulled the collar of the shirt he wore down, showing the unknown to him, arc reactor implanted into his chest. He's had enough. He didn't know where he was. He didn't know these people. He didn't know how he got there. Didn't know what happened to Sasuke or his friends. He didn't know if his friends knew he was alive or not. He couldn't use his jutsu, meaning he couldn't summon his clones or toads to help him. He was defenseless. He knew his limits. He wasn't dumb. Dense. Admittedly yes, but not dumb. He only managed to land a punch on the star guy out of sheer luck. Naruto gritted his teeth in frustration, scrubbing a hand through his hair. I need to get out of here. I need to get back to Konoha. I need to see if Choji, Neji, Kiba and Akamaru, Shikamaru, and Bushy Brow are alright. Did Sasuke escape? Was he captured? Just what happened? Exclamation mark. Was anyone hurt? Tony held his hands up. Whoa, kid, calm down. He tried to calm the blonde down, as everyone watched him starting to look frantic. His sensors picked up his vitals increasing in stress. His heart rate is spiking. His stress is going critical. Naruto. Janet called to him in worry. However, Naruto ignored her, ignored Eve. Ryon as he became lost in his frantic thoughts and worries. Was everyone okay? Was anyone hurt fighting against those sound guys? Was Lee? He did just get his surgery. Did that idiot Sasuke escape to Orochimaru? Where the hell was he? Were these people keeping him hostage? Just what the hell was GOI? Gah! Naruto let out a loud gasp, gripping his chest as a sudden spike of pain coursed through his body from his chest. The pain was quick, but it was enough to take his breath away, forcing him to fall on his butt. Naruto! Wasp shouted, quickly running to him after snapping out of her shocked dazed. Having been unsure of how to help him in his panicked state. She knelt to his side while the others approached them. Are you okay? She asked the groaning blonde as he rubbed his chest over the arc reactor. Nantakata. What the hell? Closing parenthesis. Captain America looked at Iron Man. Tony. He asked, getting a headshake. Wasn't me. 1 second the kid was having a panic attack, the next. He looked like he got a sudden shock that snapped him out of it. Tony said, his suit analyzing the kid's vitals, watching them settle down. Cap looked at Thor, but the god shook his head, saying it wasn't him. Hank shook his head as he helped Janet get the kid on his feet. Well, whatever it was, at least the child seems okay now. Tony shook his head, sighing. Let's get him to the med bay to make sure he's stable. Meanwhile, in Naruto's mindscape. What did you do? Kushina shouted, as she and Minato glared at Kyuubi, who while the parents were watching LP Leslie as their son went through a meltdown from worrying over the well-being of his friends. The Kyuubi suddenly slammed one of his tails against the bars of his cage, causing a surge of chakra to hot throughout the chamber and down the pipes. Kyuubi scoffed at the glares from the couple. You should show some gratitude for preventing your spawn from imploding his heart with how fast it was going. He shot at them. If he hadn't surged his chakra through the boy's body, causing a spike of pain from the travel through the disconnected coils. His pathetic container would have pushed his heart over its limit. Dying from ceasing function, Minato and Kushina glared at the fox, yet couldn't help but concede. In the end, whether they liked him or not, he did save their son. So they'll give him that. As they nodded in thanks to it, earning a scoff from the beast. Cow, Sanctum Sanctorum, New York, Greenwich Village, corner of Bleecker Street and Fenno Place. 177A Bleecker Street, New York City, New York. To all the citizens of the widespread city, the Sanctum Sanctorum was nothing more than another 3 stories tall ordinary building with a dome roof and chimney. Requiring nothing more than a spare 1-second glance as they walk past it in their ordinary, everyday lives. However, while its outward appearance may resemble that of a normal NY antique structure, in truth it LD secrets and wonders within it that would make heads spin. This seemingly normal building, in fact, served as both the personal residence and base of the former neurosurgeon and current magic practitioner and sorcerer of the mystic arts, Drive, Stephen Strange, more commonly referred to as Dr. Strange. The building, or more accurately the location itself, was an area that served as the gray test concentration of mystical energies and phenomena in all of existence, acting as an anchor point to every other known and unknown dimensions and realities. Within the confines of the building, Aid Sorcerer could be found within his personal chambers within the building, floating several feet off the ground, reading a book while several more floated around him, waiting to be read as well. Of course, should anyone who knew Stephen personally be in the room, they would easily note that in truth, the man was deep in thought, oblivious to the world. An expression of focus on his face, normally worn when he used to perform surgeries. Something that Wong noticed as he entered the chamber, a couple of books in hand. Setting the books down in front of the silent sorcerer, Wong decided to find out what was on Strange's mind. Strange, he spoke, getting Stephen's attention as he blinked before focusing on Wong. Strange, what seems to be on your mind? You've been very quiet ever since you returned from your visit to the Avengers. Could it be the boy? Strange sighed, setting the books around him down gently to the ground. Indeed, he rightened himself up, feet on the floor. Turning, he faced the view outside his window. This event is troubling. For the first time ever, a being from outside our existence has appeared. It's not unheard of for beings from outside the solar system, or another universe to appear. The Ancient One has faced quite a few of them herself throughout her many centuries. Wong said. However, Strange shook his head. You misunderstand. Not outside our universe. I meant outside our multiverse. Strange said, making Wong's eyes widen. Turning to him, Strange nodded. Somehow, someway, a young human child, a teenager, no older than 15, managed to not only break the barriers through realities, but also managed to travel all the way from his multiverse, into our own, and not suffer the slightest damage outside of the ones he received prior. Wong was stunned at what he was hearing. What Strange was saying. It should be impossible for any being outside of a high-level being or a deity. I have never heard of such a thing. Perhaps not even the Ancient One, either. I've checked every book and scroll in the library. I've found nothing. Never before has such an event occurred. Neither here nor in any of the known realities of the multiverse. At least, none that were recorded. And that's not the only thing, he said, getting Wong to refocus on the man. Call it an old habit, but I used it, he hinted, once more getting a wide-eyed expression, knowing what he was referring to. You used the time stone. Strange, you know the consequences of knowing about untold events. Wong scolded, referring to the powerful Infinity Stone, an object of immense power over time itself, long kept secured by the Ancient Ones throughout history, passed down from Sorcerer Supreme to the next. With Strange being the current keeper and guardian. Strange held up his hand to try and ease his friend. It was necessary. We are dealing with something completely new for the first time in ever. Who knows what this could lead to? Wong shook his head. The universe has rules, Strange. Life has rules and boundaries. All of existence and reality. No, wing too much about the future could bring untold chaos and anarchy. The librarian warned. I only peeked, nothing more. Stephen reassured, getting a heavy sigh from the man. I pray that's all you did. So, what insight and answers did your peak give you? Wong asked, crossing his arms. Strange frowned, thinking his words over. A storm, he said, getting a confused raised brow. No pun intended, but time is strange, unpredictable. It flows in a straight line, smooth and endless. However, it branches off. Small, thin branches, but still there. Alternate timelines, alternate outcomes, Wong said, with strange nodding. It sounded normal so far. Time always shifted with every choice every human, no, all intelligent beings made. Be it going left or right. There was always an alternative in some other reality. Each mostly still linking back to the main timeline, eventually. Same route, same destination. However, Strange trailed off. Wong raised a brow. However, question mark. Time's been splintered, Strange stated, surprising Wong. Strange shook his head, sighing. No, not just splintered, nor just small branches forming from it. I saw the main timeline of our universe breaking apart, going in different directions. Sometimes merging with other realities, timelines. Wong frowned worriedly. That's impossible, Strange, for such things to happen. It would require an event of immeasurable proportion. An incursion. What you're describing. It sounds like madness. I know. How could one boy cause such a thing to happen? Strange frowned, thinking. Such a thing made no sense. Even if a person from another entire existence should appear in their universe, it wouldn't have caused time to act in such a way. It was unheard of. Not unless it was an event that was too much for the forces of balance to handle, causing a ripple to erupt throughout time as a whole. Such a thing would only happen when. Strange's eyes widened. Could it be? Perhaps because he's not just some boy. Wong looked at him, confused. What do you mean? For such changes in time to occur, it means that the boy's arrival sent out a ripple through the whole of time, changing events in ways no one could have foreseen. Not even time itself. It's as if the future rewrote itself with Naruto's arrival, adding him into the equation as an immeasurable and uncalculated variable. This would imply that Naruto himself held an important role in his universe, and his transference to our own affected our future. Wong frowned, not liking what this could mean. For his arrival to change the future in such an unpredictable way, this could only mean. Strange narrowed his eyes. Naruto's a Nexus being. Wong held an utmost serious expression. Strange, you should know how dangerous a Nexus being is. Who knows how much that boy's appearance has changed future events. He Su, LD have made things better or worse beyond possibility, and we wouldn't even know it. Not to mention the fact of the girl. For there to be two within the same reality, it could very well destroy all of existence. I know. The longer that boy remains on this planet, in this universe, the more he could endanger it. I know. He must be returned to his own universe. I know. You must return him immediately. Strange. Stephen hummed, cupping his chin in thought. Perhaps, he is something we need. He muttered, recalling the other unspoken details of the futures he witnessed. Avengers Tower, Tony's lab. Naruto squinted his eyes in slight discomfort as a spotlight shined down on him as he laid on a metal bed, his shirt removed, fully showing his chest and the implant in it. He looked around in a mix of confusion and caution, looking at the group of men stationed around him, while the armored one stood in front of what looked like some transparent window floating in midair. He turned his head to the side where the shrinking woman stood next to the man whose face he kicked twice, once as an act of offense against what he thought to be his kidnappers. The next, out of his own amusement. Meeting his eyes, the woman who introduced herself as Janetto or something like that, smiled at him, waving. She was really nice it seemed. She's been constantly smiling at him. She was weird. Looking at the man, Henku, he saw the man looking at him with a weird look in his eyes. Smart or thoughtful, reminding him a bit of Shikamaru or Kabuto. Only, not lazy like the former, or evil like his enemy. More like in the way he was wondering stuff about him. Like how Ero Sennin would look at women. Only, without the perving. Hopefully, turning his head to the other side, he saw the red-haired woman off to the side, Natasha, crossing her arms as she looked at whatever the metal man was doing, occasionally glancing at him. Her eyes glinting with interest like she was trying to figure him out. She was obviously trained in a similar profession to a shinobi, that much even Naruto could tell. Still, for whatever smile she put on, Naruto's shinobi instincts told him she was as deadly as Zabuza, and to be careful around her. Her outfit could really give Lee's tight jumpsuit a run for its money. His eyes then rolled to the group of men standing together. He pursed his lips, trying to remember their names. I think it was Samu, Sam, Kurinto, Clint, So, Thor, and Sudabu, Steve. He thought, thinking he had it right. Of course, given the language barrier, and Tony's, not so -100%, computer translation, he was only partially correct. Meeting his stare, Kurinto gave him an annoyed look, while the large man so smiled kindly at him. Not liking the archer guy's attitude, Naruto responded by sticking his tongue out at him, making the large blonde man laugh, while Kurinto lightly scoffed with an eye roll. Meanwhile, Sudabu seemed to be talking with the armored man, Tony Sudaku, about something, not that Naruto could understand. Sighing in boredom, Naruto just leaned his head back upwards, looking up at the ceiling, remaining still as Janetto asked, more like gestured, him to do. While confused as hell about what was going on, he will trust her, and her group, for the moment. At least until he finally got some answers. While Naruto laid quietly on the table, Tony was finishing off his scanning of the kid. Anything bad, Tony? Steve asked, getting a head shake from the genius inventor. Other than some stitches reopening and some scratches, the kid's just fine. The arc reactor isn't damaged either and is fully functioning, Tony said, turning off the scanner above the teen, making him blink, looking at the group in confusion. Though the reactor will need to be charged, as the reactor model was his first miniature one ever in built-ins. Ida cave using whatever tools and scraps he had available at the time. Unlike his following in newer models, the battery supply was garbage in comparison and required weekly charge-ups to function. Only reason he hadn't charged it beforehand was that he needed to wait for the power source to fully establish a sort of link with the kid's strange energy, as well as having to wait for the kid to wake up from his nap to run a proper check. He just wasn't counting on the kid to wake up far sooner than he should, as well as the wild chase that happened afterward. He was pretty surprised the kid had enough energy to move at all for as long as he had. With a press on his hollow screen, a round barrel plug-in charge lowered from the ceiling. Approaching the kid, Tony grabbed the charger and de-inserted it around the reactor with a click. Nanoshidaruno, Datbeo, what are you doing? Naruto asked, raising a brow as he looked down at the plug as J.A.R.V.I.S. provided translation. Just charging the battery that's keeping you alive, kid, Tony told him. Though even with the words translated, Naruto was still confused. Battery? What battery? He didn't see a chemical jar around. How long will the charging take? Janet asked, moving to stand at the table's side with Hank behind her. She slapped Naruto's hand when he moved to touch the charger, getting a yelp and glare from the teen. Don't touch. Tony chuckled at that. Not too long. A half hour at best for a full charge. Oi, Naruto shouted, getting everyone's attention as he glared at them. Mo kodite moremasu ka, watashi ga doko ni iru no ka. Can I get some answers already? Like where the hell I am. Closing parenthesis. He wants to know where he is. Natasha translated before J.A.R.V.I.S. Could. Steve nodded, stepping forward. We could also use some answers as to what led him to our world. While they got the gist of it from Strange, it was only a short summary he could provide. Hopefully, they could get a better understanding from the source. Thor crossed his arms. One thing is certain, however. The young lad is truly a warrior, he said, grinning as everyone saw the muscles on Naruto's chest and arms. Nothing big like Thor, but it clearly showed that the teen trained his body and physique. Thor would certainly wish to test the boy's skills in a spar. Janet frowned, looking at the muscles. Sure, there are young children who train their bodies for sports and physical competitions, but this was a child soldier they were talking about. Someone trained for deadly combat and war. It just didn't sit well with her. Seeing the conflicted look on her face, Hank placed a hand on Janet's shoulder. Tony nodded, turning to Naruto. All right then, let's get some answers from the kid. J.A.R.V.I.S. Ready to begin translating your words, sir. Nodding, Tony started. Well, kid, you're confused, and so are we. So Hat say we all take a deep breath and calm ourselves and then we can figure things out. Okay. Sat, Kodomo, Anata wa konran shite masu, so shite watashitachi mo konran shite masu. Disakara, watashitachi zenin ga shinkokyu shite ochitsuku tu, monogoto o raikai suru kodo ga dekimasu. Wakata, closing parenthesis. Naruto frowned, thinking, before eventually nodding slowly, making Tony smile. Great. Now, as stated before, I'm Tony Stark. And right now, we're in my lovely tower, Avengers Tower. And this is my team of heroes, the Avengers. Sabarashi, Sat, Mei ni nobeta yo ni, watashi wa tonisutakudasu, so shite ima. Watashitachi watashi no sutekina tu, abenjazutawa ni amasu. So shite, kor wa watashi no hiro no chimu, abenjazutasu. He introduced, gesturing to his team, who either gave the teen nods of greeting or smiles. Being polite, Naruto bowed to them in greeting, being careful with the cable stuck to his chest. Now, what's your name? Where did you come from? Sat, Anata no name wa nan dezu ka. Shushin wa dakira dezu ka. Closing parenthesis. Naruto frowned, wondering what he should say. As a loyal shinobi of Konoha, he shouldn't reveal any important information to potential enemies. Though, other than his status as a Jinchuriki, he really didn't know any important information. Thankfully, he learned in the academy, and under Kakashi-sensei about what he should say show. Ld he ever become captured by an enemy shinobi or village and be interrogated or questioned. He still was unsure if he should really trust these unknown people, even though they did heal him. Frowning, he glanced at Janet, her kind eyes staring back at him in confusion, concern, and interest. After a second, she smiled at him, reaching over and grabbing his hand in a comforting move. It only served to confuse Naruto even more. Why? Looking up, he looked at the other adults around him. Some of them smiled at him. Some frowned in silence as they looked at him in curiosity. But no hostility in their eyes. Just comfort and concern. Why were they looking at him like that? Shouldn't they be trying to scare him? To make him answer their questions and provide information? Didn't they be threatening or torturing him by now? But they didn't. They just stared at him with kind eyes. Eyes not unlike the one he'd usually get from Old Man Chuki and Ayame Nichan, from Iruka-sensei, Ero Sennin, Shizune Nichan, and Tsunade Bachan. His frown deepening, Naruto looked down at his lap. Wherever he was, he wasn't a prisoner. Closing his eyes, Naruto took a deep breath. Opening his eyes, he raised his head, staring straight at Tonisutaku and Sutabu, who he assumed were the ones in charge given their body language. Uzumaki Naruto Tomoshimasu, 15 Sai, Hinik, Oku no Kono wa ga Kur no Genin Q Shinobu, Ninja Toroku Bongo 012607, Anata ga Watashi o Mitsuketa Toki, Watashi wa Taicho ga Yokunakata to Omu Node, Watashi ni Irio Enjo o Taikyo shite Kurt Arigato, Datbeo. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. Age 15. Genin class shinobi of Konohagakure in the Land of Fire. Ninja registration number 012607. I thank you for providing me with medical assistance. As I'm guessing I wasn't in the best of shape when you found me, Datbeo. He said, bowing as best he could with the cable stuck to his chest. As J.A.R.V.I.S. translated the teen's words. The team was silent, going over what they heard. Wait, Janet said, blinking as something she heard stuck out to her. You're 15, she asked, looking at Naruto closely. She would never have thought he'd be 15. He was even shorter than her. She had thought he was around 12 or 13. Ha, ninja boy is a midget, Clint said in amusement, taking a jab at the height of the boy who wrecked his room. Even though he didn't understand what Kurinto was saying, Naruto felt his brow twitch, having a feeling the Tem was making fun of his height. Note to self, prank archer. Thor also laughed, only he was more joyful. Ah, the lad reminds me more of the fierce dwarves of Nidavellir. He stared, knowing that even with their shortness in size compared to other races within the 9 realms, dwarves were known and praised as both fearsome warriors and near unparalleled craftsmen and builders. I guess 15's better than a 12-year-old child soldier. Sam commented to Steve, uncertain as the World War II hero frowned with a hum, crossing his arms. Steve shook his head. Be it 12 or 15, the battlefield is no place for someone so young. Carol covered a giggle, finding it hilarious. Well, someone's a late grower, she thought. The kid was about 3 or so years younger than her, as she was 18, with her next birthday around the corner, but for him to be kid size was pretty funny. Tony shook his head, deciding to get things back on track, which was storing that tidbit of information for later. Moving on. What's all that other stuff about? He asked the kid. However, before Naruto would speak, Captain America answered for him. It's his military information, Steve said, getting everyone's attention. It's a basic warfare tactic. In the army, it is taught that if a soldier's ever in unknown territory and meets with unfamiliar inhabitants, or in worst case, was captured by enemy forces and was being interrogated, to speak only of their base information. Registration number, squadron leader, their commanding officer or even their rank. To only give information that is basically useless to the enemy. Sometimes, it is repeated again and again in a mantra. A failsafe to trick the mind from accidentally revealing any sensitive or important information. Looks like wherever the kid's from, they are of a military-minded fashion. Natasha added in, knowing from personal experience and training. Janet frowned. So he thinks we're the enemy. Steve, however, shook his head. It doesn't seem like it. More like he is unsure of how to treat his current position. We have not acted hostile towards him, and instead helped patch his injuries, to which he is thankful for. However, that doesn't mean he trusts us completely, he said, looking at Naruto, who stared back at him with narrowed, confused but alert eyes. Hank nodded in understanding, before frowning, cupping his chin. Still, to teach a child how to behave if captured. Just what kind of world did he come from? Said he came from some place called Konohagakure, or something. Sam questioned, raising a brow. Konohagakure Black Widow corrected. It means village hidden in the leaves. Somewhere in a place called the Land of Fire. So obviously not from Earth. Hawkeye pointed out, having never heard of such a place in his many years as an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., nor from any of the other realms. I have never heard of such a land, and I've been to all sorts of wondrous and mysterious lands, Thor stated, crossing his arms. Land of Fire made him think of the realm of eternal fire, Muspelheim, yet he highly doubted the young lad was from there. The thought of a mortal surviving there was laughable. He's human. That much is obvious. He just isn't from our Earth, Carol said, placing her hands on her hips as Tony nodded. There's also the fact he came out of a portal looking like he went through a blender. She pointed out, frowning in remembrance of the state he was in when she caught him. Meaning he came from another Earth or a similar planet in another universe or reality. Question is, how did he get here? Tony asked, looking at Naruto. Naruto stared back with a raised brow, more confused than he has ever been in his life. Tony sighed, rubbing the back of his head. What a headache. Aliens are one thing, something I never thought I'd say, but an alternate Earth. The multiverse theory being proven. I am not cut out for this. Stepping up, Steve placed a hand on Tony's shoulder. Take a deep breath, Tony. We're all as lost on this as you, he said, with the others nodding in agreement, even Thor. For now, let us focus on why Naruto appeared when he did. Let me talk to him. Janet spoke up, getting the others' attention. He trusts me. I can convince him to tell us his story. Tony raised a brow at her. You sure about that? 'Cause he just spent the last half hour running all over the top 2 floors of the tower, away from everyone. He reminded her. Janet nodded. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing, she stated. Tony let out a sigh, giving her the go-ahead as he stepped back, taking a step closer to the teen as Tony ordered the A.I. To translate her words, Janet smiled at the shinobi. Naruto, she said, getting the teen's attention as he looked at her, brow raised. She smiled at him, much to Naruto's embarrassment as his cheeks dusted pink, not used to a beautiful woman smiling at him like that. Can you tell us what made you appear here? When we found you, you were practically dead. So, what happened? Koko ni arawareta kikake o oshitekudasai. Watashitachi ga anata o mitsuketa toki, anata wa jijitsujo shindaita. Do shita no. Closing parenthesis. Naruto frowned, tilting his head. He didn't know what he should say. What could he say? It was pretty much illegal to reveal mission informatio. And without the approval of the appointed leader or superior, in that case being Shikamaru or Tsunade Bachan. Not to mention, while it wasn't stated, Naruto was pretty sure revealing the attempted desertion of a fellow Konoha shinobi. Even more, a member of a high-class clan like Sasuke, Konoha's only remaining Uchiha, could land him in big trouble. He could face imprisonment, torture, maybe even worse. Even if these people helped him, Naruto had a duty as a Konoha shinobi in her protection. So, he stayed quiet, shaking his head negatively, turning his head away defiantly. Janet frowned, seeing the whiskered teen refusing to say anything. She gave his hand still in her grasp a gentle squeeze, getting him to, while not fully facing her, glance her way out of the corner of his eyes. We just want to understand. To know what happened. So please, tell us. It might be sensitive information, only to be known to the people of his village. Steve said, knowing the routine of military work and how soldiers were forbidden from revealing sensitive details about mission parameters or objectives. Doing otherwise was punishable depending on the information in hand. Tony hummed, turning to Steve. Didn't that strange guy say something about the kid fighting a comrade of his before being sent here? Remembering that detail, Steve nodded. Yeah, if I remember right. Strange said that this comrade of his became a traitor. Hearing this, Janet frowned, turning back to the silent Naruto. Did your friend do this to you? Anata no Yujin wa anata ni koro shimashita ka. Closing parenthesis. That got Naruto to reach, as his head shot towards her, eyes wide, wondering how she knew. After a moment, he frowned, abruptly turning his head away again with a click of his teeth. Eyes narrowing in a hard glare at the floor. Sasuke. Meanwhile, the Avengers all frowned, narrowing their eyes, looking at each other. For a friend to leave Naruto with a large hole in his chest. Sparks surged over Thor. That is no such comrade. He muttered angrily. Sam shook his head. I've seen some stuff in the Force, but what this kid's been through, it's inhuman. He said, shivering at the memory of his state when he first appeared. And it was done by a brother in arms. Damn. Natasha was silent, her arms crossed, not having any visible reactions. However, mentally, she had the urge to kill someone. Preferably the person who seemed to try and kill Naruto. While being trained as an assassin since childhood herself, with an ocean of blood from the people she's killed through the many years, Natasha always had one rule. The one thing that allowed her to keep the last shred of humanity the Red Room had not cut out. No killing children, no matter how young or old. It was the one rule to keep Natasha from forever becoming the monster that the Black Widow was. To allow her to still keep a piece of her soul through all the things she had done and experienced. It was also the one thing that finally broke her out of the Red Room's control. To be more than just a mindless, emotionless weapon. For Naruto, someone who might have possibly lived a life like her. Trained to be a warrior, a killer going by his weaponry, it struck Natasha hard. For it brought back memories she long since locked away. Memories of that place. Memories of the life she used to live. Memories of the people she abandoned. People like Naruto. Janet muttered. Naruto didn't look at her. Still, the wasp continued on. What happened? Do Shita know? Closing parenthesis. What happened? Naruto wanted to scoff, a sense of anger surging from his gut. What didn't happen? Memories of the events he went through prior to waking up wherever he was flashing through his mind. The news of Sasuke's defection from the village to go join Orochimaru, following their abrupt battle on top of the hospital roof. He and his friends formed a squad to go after him, running into the sound group and being forced to split up one by one to handle them. Him fighting that bone guy. Sasuke coming out of that coffin thing, before all of a sudden running off. Showing up to handle the enemy while he chased after Sasuke. Catching up to him in the Valley of the End. Their fight, nearly dying a couple of times by Sasuke's Chidori through his chest and practically burning alive with a broken neck. The reveal of how Sasuke truly saw him as his friend, before declaring that he would break their bond. Kyuubi's power coursing through him. Sasuke's transformation. Their final attacks colliding. The pain he felt when he came to realize that Sasuke would not give up his goal for power even if he was captured, as well as the pain he felt and he allowed himself to be pierced by Sasuke's attack as an advantage to get closer to him to land a hit. The strange feeling he felt when he was held in the air by a strange force. The sensation that spread through his body. A pain unlike anything he'd ever felt before, then a blinding flash of light. A sense of weightlessness he felt, like he was flying. Then he felt like he was painless. Lee dying as he opened his eyes and saw Janetto and Natasha, and then waking up in the metal room. What happened? A lot happened in just the span of what could have been 2 days, give or take. However, it all had a single thing in common. A person, who caused everything. Who, due to their stupid action, could have possibly severely hurt his friends. Sasuke. He growled, gritting his teeth in righteous anger as he clenched his hands into tight fists, veins pulsing. It was all because of that arrogant idiot. He did all of that, for power. From Orochimaru, the person who launched an invasion on their own home and killed the Hokage Gigi. What the hell was Sasuke thinking going to him? Oh, that's right, he wasn't. Not when Itachi was on his mind. And he was the Dobi. What n? Naruto wouldn't give to slam a Rasengan on Sasuke's face right now. Janet frowned at the hand squeezing her own hard enough to break her bones, but she ignored it as she watched Naruto shaking in anger. Hissing the name of what she was assuming was this so-called friend, who did this to him. Having moved his glare to his lap, Janet and the others bore witness to the sheer anger expressed on Naruto's face. His eyes, nearly shadowed by his fallen hair, still revealed the storm of emotions the whiskered blonde was feeling. Obvious anger, yet also hurt, betrayal, as well as hope. Whoever this Sasuke was, whatever he or she did, it struck Naruto hard, and Naruto did not like them. Clicking his tongue in annoyance at the mental image of his teammate, Naruto closed his eyes, taking a deep breath to calm himself down. It wouldn't be good or polite to take his anger out on these people when they didn't deserve it. So, breathing in and out, he let out a deep, tired, exhausted, shuddering exhale. By the log, was he tired? Shaking his head, banishing thoughts of the Uchiha away from his head as he focused on the present, Naruto opened his eyes, frowning a tired frown as he looked at Janetto. "Ie ni karatai, I want to go home," he told her. That was all he wanted right now. Home. He wanted his bed. He wanted a hot bowl of ramen. He wanted to see his friends. He just wanted to report to Bachin, give his statement, and forget everything that happened with the mission. To put it all behind him. Whether the mission was a success or not, he'd worry about it some other time. Hearing J.A.R.V.I.S.'s translation, Janet frowned. She muttered, looking at the others, unsure of what she should say to that. Tony and Steve mirrored her frown. How were they supposed to tell the kid that they didn't know how to send him back to his home? That for all they knew, he was stuck in their world. However, before Janet or anyone could say anything, someone did it for them. "I'm afraid that, for the time being, you are stuck here, Uzumaki Naruto." In a blinding flash of light that forced everyone to cover their eyes or faces, Drive Strange appeared in the room, his cloak flapping as he softly landed on the ground. He smiled apologetically at the group. My sincerest apologies. Perhaps I shouldn't have arrived with this method," he said, not meaning to temporarily blind them with his literal flashy entrance. "Itai tilde Nantakata I," Naruto muttered, rubbing his eyes. Blinking the spots away from his eyes, Naruto saw the new person in the room, raising a brow. "Itai Darada, Datbeo, Soshite, Masaki to wa Nanadezu ka. Who the heck are you, Datbeo? And what's with the cape?" Closing parenthesis. Steven smiled at the displaced shinobi. "Sor wa Mantadezu. Watashi no name Asudo Renji Hakase Dezu. Watashi wa, Koko ni Iru Kono Hikori Takaki Otoko to Isho ni, Anata ga Shikara Wazuka 1 inchi Hanaret. A Genzai no Basho ni Seisho ni Tochoku Shita Toki ni, Anata no Inochi o Sukuda Hito Tachi Dashita." Sor wa anata ga anata no kiro ga setsudan sa retanachi ni chakura o morishi hajimeta nachi anat. Aga ima I kite iru to iu care ni zokusuru anata no mun no sono mujun no okage dezu. It's a cloak. My name is Dr. Strange. I, along with this proud man here, were the ones who saved your Li Fei when you first arrived at our current location, a mere inch away from death. It's thanks to that contraption on your chest belonging to him that is the reason how you are alive right now after you began to leak out chakra after your pathways had been cut. Strange explains, gesturing towards Tony, making the man blink, before pointing at the arc reactor on Naruto's chest, as the genin went wide-eyed. Nani? What? Closing parenthesis. Strange nodded. Mashiwakira Masenga. Anata no Kiro ga Kanzen ni Iyasuriru made. Anata wa Anata no Jutsu o Ryo Suru Koto ga Dekanai Narimasu. Chakura no Myun. No Mawari ni Mukuru Kajiride wa Aramasen. So Suru Koto wa. Anata ga Sudani Kaiken Shita to Watashi ga Suzuku Shidiru Hagashi Atami o Hitotsu Dake Dezu ka. I'm sorry to say that until your pathways are healed fully, you will be unable to utilize your jutsu. Not as long as you channel your chakra around your chest. Doing so would only cause you severe pain, which I'm assuming you've already experienced. Closing parenthesis. Naruto flinched, recalling when he tried to form a Rasengan to break through a metal door, only to feel incredible pain. He frowned. No jutsu, no clones, or summons. That me, and he had nothing to use should he ever get in a fight. What was he supposed to do now? Watashi ga anata ni sute nakariba naranai warui nayusu wa sordake de wanai node wanai ka to omoimasu. I'm afraid that's not the only bad news I have to give you. Strange said, getting Naruto to look at him, his frown deepening. What else could go wrong? Anata no seiken no koziri ga genji. Su o kawashita node wanai ka to omoimasu. Yori yoku setsume suru tame ni. Anata wa anata no sakai kara. Anata no uchu kara, anata no jigen kara kanzen ni oidasuri, so shite watashitachi jishin ni tokahanarite okura rimashita. Shibaraku noida, watashi ga anata o anata no ai ni okurakesu hoho o mitsukuru koto ga dekiru made, anata wa kono wakuse detachi oho shitiru node wanai ka to omoimasu. Mashiwake aramasen, I'm afraid your latest skirmish has caused a break in reality. To explain better, you were cast out of your world, out of your universe, your dimension entirely, and sent far off into our own. I'm afraid that for the time being, you are stuck on this planet until I can figure out a way to send you back to your home. I'm sorry, Strange said, bowing his head down to the blonde for his situation. Naruto stared at him, eyes wide, unable to believe what he just heard. He completely understood half of what the man said, but he got the gist of it, he just couldn't believe it. He was stuck there. Exclamation mark. He couldn't go home. No. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a trick. It had to be his friends. He needed to make sure they were alright. And what about Sakura-chan? Kakashi-sensei, Ero Senin, Tsunade Bachan, Shizune Nichan, everyone. They were waiting for him to get back. He couldn't be stuck here. Naruto let it all out. His anger. His grief, his frustration, he let it all out in one big scream. The Avengers could only watch on, frowning saddle. Why is the teen who fell from the sky screamed? Janet felt tears slide down her cheeks as she rubbed the sobbing teen's back. She felt so sorry for him. A feeling Captain America shared, knowing had it felt like to be separated from his home and friends. From the people he cared about. From his special lady. Everyone was silent, unable to say anything as the cries of a stranded shinobi in a world far from his own echoed through the room. However, through his cries, through his pain, Naruto made a vow. A promise. He would find a way home. No matter what, he wouldn't give up. He didn't care how long it took. Somehow, someway, he would get back to his village. To his friends. That was a promise. A promise of a lifetime. Naruto's mindscape. Kushina frowned. A tear idling down her cheek as she grieved for her son's situation. Oh Masuko. Feeling a hand on her shoulder, she looked at her husband, who smiled a saddening smile like her, but trying to provide some comfort. There's nothing we can do, Kushina. No matter how much we want to. He said, sighing just as sad. To be forced out of one's home. To possibly never see your friends and comrades again for a long time. For someone like Naruto, who grew up an orphan similar to Minato, but while Minato grew up with care from the patrons and strong friendships, Naruto had to suffer loneliness and isolation from adults who feared and hated him. It was only the bonds and friendship he eventually gained that saved him from a suffocating darkness. However, to suddenly be separated from those very same friends worlds away. Right after being forced to battle someone he loved like a brother he never had. Minato couldn't possibly imagine what his son was feeling. He could only hope, his son wouldn't be crushed by the weight of all that has come to pass. Minato doubted even someone as strong of will as his son could handle such overwhelming weight. He had already bottled years of negativity deep inside of him. He feared this would only serve to push his son to the brink of collapse. Either physically or even psychologically. This could cause him to snap, and become like how his friend Gaara used to be. Minato thought grimly, hoping that didn't happen. The idea of his son coming to think of murdering to fill a hole in his heart, it made Minato shudder. Hopefully, these Avengers would be able to save his son before he drowned in an endless void of darkness. Behind the seal's cage, Kyuubi frowned, closing his eyes. This is quite the turn of events you've gotten yourself into, brat. Now, how will you handle it? A whole new world, an entire reality so far and different from his own. It made Kyuubi wonder if his father, the Sage of Six Paths, ever achieved such travel before his end. Or was Naruto the first from the elemental nations? It made Kyuubi wonder what sort of things the brat will experience here. Back in the real world. His eyes red, dull, and exhausted. Naruto stayed silent and still, not moving as Strange placed 2 fingers together against the side of his neck, just under his ear. About 2 minutes or so passed since his brief break in emotion. 2 minutes before he firmly seized his tear leakage as crying wasn't going to get him anywhere. Then, all of a sudden, the strange guy began touching him. Oi, what are you doing? Oi, Nanashiteruno, he asked, but not doing anything to push him away. It didn't seem like the man was doing anything harmful to him, so Naruto let things play out. He was just wondering what he was doing. Besides, he was too tired to put up a fight. Watashi wa anata no gengo no mandai o shusei shiteru tokoro dezu. Watashitachi zenin ga otagai o raikai. Suru yo ni nata ho ga ida omoimashita. I am just fixing your language problem. I figured it'd be better if we all came to understand one another. Strange explained, using magic to help Naruto understand English as well as speak it, as it'd be better if everyone didn't need words translated. After a few seconds, he pulled his hand away. That should do it. How do you feel? Naruto scratched his throat. My throat itches. Whatever the man did, it left his throat feeling itchy. Hey, we can understand you, Janet exclaimed, surprised. Naruto looked at her, blinking. Hey, I can understand you, he exclaimed back, able to understand her words clearly. Steve looked at Strange. I assume you helped clear things up and solve the language problem. Strange nodded to him. Yes, I told the boy of his situation and the current inability to return home. I thought being able to understand people could provide some aid to his stay, however long it is. And as you can clearly see, it allowed him to understand and speak our language. Of course, that excludes the ability to read our language, as it wouldn't be right to make things too easy for him right off the bat. Tony crossed his arms, sighing. Of course, why should anything be easy? He stated sarcastically. Ignoring the grouchy inventor, Steven looked at Captain America. By the way, thank you for notifying me about Naruto's awakening. I apologize it took me so long to arrive. I had some things to take care of. Cap nodded at him. No problem. Nothing of the sort was broken or damaged too severely. Clint huffed, crossing his arms in annoyance. I beg to differ. Seriously, a hole was on his room floor. Come on. Janet smiled at Naruto. I'm glad you can finally understand me. Though I would have liked it if it was done sooner. She commented, given all that's happened. Naruto tilted his head, smiling slightly. Yeah, he said, nodding a slight nod, rubbing the back of his head. He then frowned. recalling the chaos he sort of sprung up when he woke up earlier. He supposed he should apologize for that. Turning his head to the others in the room, he bowed as best he could. I'm sorry for any trouble I've caused you, Datbeo. Janet giggled, covering her mouth. Datbeo. Hee. What is that? A verbal tick. So cute, she noted, making Naruto's cheeks burn with embarrassment. Janet then waved him off, and don't worry, no one was hurt. Well, except maybe Hank. She said, turning to her boyfriend, who smiled uneasily, rubbing his nose in remembrance. Wincing, Naruto bowed to the shrinking man. I'm really sorry for that, Datbeo. Hank chuckled, shaking his head. It's all right, no hard feelings, letting out a sigh of relief. Naruto nodded. Thank you, Hanku-san. Hank said, rubbing the back of his head. It's Hank. That's what I said. Hanku. Hanku. It's just Hank, Naruto. Janet cut in. Naruto frowned at her, starting to grow annoyed. That's what I said, Janetto. It's just Janet. Janetto. Yanet too, Datbeo. Thor let out a mighty laugh. As he watched the boy and his small teammate argue, foreheads pressed together as they glared at the other. I like this boy. He has a fierce fire in his heart. Natasha sighed, rubbing her head from the shouting. Good grief. As that was happening, Steve, Tony, and Strange conversed amongst themselves. So, what's gonna happen to the kid? Tony asked the sorcerer. Strange sighed. I'll search for a way to return him back to his world. Unfortunately, due to his place of origin being far outside our own range of reality, it'll take some time. Tony raised a brow, shrugging his shoulders. What's the rush? After what he's been through, the kid deserves a break from traveling. Forced or otherwise, he said, but Strange shook his head. I'm afraid young Naruto's sudden arrival could bring trouble in the near future. He stated. Cap raised a brow. How so? His drop into our universe sent out a ripple throughout time. Events that would have come to pass could be changed. Perhaps for the worse, perhaps for the better, but time has changed, becoming unpredictable. Now, there is no telling what the future holds for the planet. Or even the universe as a whole. Tony scoffed. So no one knows what will happen in the future. How is that any different from before? He asked. However, Steve looked serious, understanding what Strange was saying. Because of Naruto appearing, who knows what will happen now? Things could happen that they wouldn't have expected before. If the attack of Graviton was trouble, who knows what could happen now? In another part of the world, S.H.I.E.L.D. Hovercarrier. Director Fury. Agent Maria Hill asked. Nick Fury, Director of the International Peacekeeping, Law Enforcement, and Counterterrorism Agency, S.H.I.E.L.D. Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division, frowned as he stared at the large monitor showing a recording of the large swirling portal over the Avengers Tower. He narrowed his visible eye, watching as the small image of their newest member, Carol Danvers, aka Ms. Marvel, flew up at the portal, before flying down towards the two. W'er as the portal closed before vanishing. Pressing some buttons on the control pad, the recording was rewound back before replaying. Pausing at the point where Ms. Marvel flew up to the portal, he zoomed in. He narrowed his eye more as he stared at a thick dark spot, having dropped out of the portal. Get the engines warmed up. Set course to New York. He was getting to the bottom of this, one way or another. Unknown location. In the middle of an otherworldly-looking forest, a figure walked down a path. Their features were hidden by a large cloak from any possible eyes. The Unch of grass echoed throughout as the figure walked silently. It would be minutes later that the figure stepped into a wide-open clearing. Taking a few steps forward, the figure paused next to a tree. I am here. The voice of a woman sounded from underneath the hood. Just then, a secondary figure, hidden by shadows, stepped out from behind the tree. Were you followed? A male voice asked. The woman shook her head. Even with his features hidden, a wide smile could be seen on the male's face. Good. Is everything ready? The woman nodded. Just give the signal, and the distractions will commence for your attack. The male chuckled wickedly. Good. Only one final piece remains, and then the games can begin. I cannot wait to see the look on my dear old brother. face as his new beloved home crumbles to dust. How exciting, wouldn't you agree, my dear enchantress? The enchantress was silent for a bit, before nodding, giving a low mutter. Yes, Loki. Whether he heard her or not, Loki chuckled. Oh Thor, you believe your new friends could help you protect your new home. We shall see. I shall make sure your little playground crumbles and you are at my mercy. After the mortal world falls, so too will Asgard, Loki said, reaching behind him. Pulling his hand forward, his grin grew, as his face was lit up by a blue glow, as he held a large blue cube. Unable to contain himself, Loki began to laugh, his laughter echoing through the clearing, while Enchantress just stood there, turning her head away, as she frowned sadly under her hood. The moon. A figure stood silently on the massive lunar surface, standing silent, without a sound, as they gazed upon the planet before it. The figure smiled, as always taken by the beauty of the planet. Its blank eyes stared on, unblinking at the sight, its smile mysterious as if watching something no one else could see. Something they took great enjoyment in watching. Undisturbed, its form was hidden by a long blue cape covering all but its head. Its large head. What future will you bring about, Naruto Uzumaki? The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.